Good evening, everybody, and welcome to September's planning meeting. I'm Councillor David A. Mahoney, and I will be chairing in the absence of Councillor Cliff Betton this evening. We're not expecting any fire drills. If the alarms do go off, the staff here will direct you to the nearest exit. Apart from Councillor Betton, are there any other apologies to be made?
Thank you, Chair. We have no more apologies, but we have Councillor Helen Whitcroft here as a substitute for Councillor Cliff Betton.
Members of the committee, are you happy for me to sign the minutes from the last planning application committee? Yep. Do any members have any declaration of interest to make on one of the issues before us this evening?
Thank you, Chair. So I've had lots of correspondence from residents, and I'm sure, like everyone else, a number of the developers as well that have got applications in this evening.
Thank you. Is everyone else the same? They've received emails? Okay, that's noted. There's going to be a small change in the running order tonight, where first item will be item number 5 will be coming up first. We have some public speakers on that. So the planning application agenda is number 15, the Royal Barracks deep cut. Can I confirm, are there any declarations of interest on this item other than the previous emails?
I'm not sure if it is an interest, however, I have met with residents primarily in 13 the Royal Way. However, I come to this meeting as a non-voting member and with my mind fully open.
Shannon, if you'd like to introduce the application.
Thank you. Is that loud enough? Bit closer? It's okay, lovely. Okay, so this application is being decided by the Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Rise. There are no updates. This is the application site. The application is for the retrospective erection of an outbuilding in the rear garden of number 15, the Royal Way. The closest neighbouring dwelling to the outbuilding is number 11 to the east, with the rear garden of number 13 to the north. The outbuilding is shown there in orange. These photos have been taken from within the site. The image to the left shows the outbuilding nestled within the existing housing development between the garage for number 15 and the built form for number 11. The outbuilding does not project beyond the existing extent of this section of the deep cut development and would comply with the objectives of the deep cut SPD. The image on the right shows the outbuilding in relation to the application dwelling, with the rear gable of number 13 behind. This image shows the outbuilding to the right and the shared boundary with number 13 on the left. There's a separation gap of 0.36 metres between the outbuilding and the boundary. The outbuilding has a mono-pitched roof, and the runoff drains into this section of garden and infiltrates the soil. The original situation would have been that any rainwater that falls on this area would also drain into the soil. So this image shows the outbuilding to the left and a 0.5 metre gap to the boundary shared with number 11. This is the closest neighbouring property to the outbuilding. These two images were taken from the Royal Way to the north of the site. The garden of number 13 is located between the public realm and the application site, so there will be a separation distance of approximately 7.7 metres between the outbuilding and the public realm. The image on the right is taken from the pavement. The image on the left is taken from the opposite side of the Royal Way. So you can see the roof of the outbuilding and the trees to the south, views of the trees to the south have been retained. It's also worth noting that there are several other existing examples of detached garages and outbuildings visible from the street scene. These two images are taken from the Royal Way looking towards the southeast. So the image in left includes number 13 to the right, number 11 is set further back. The roof of the outbuilding is visible between the two. The image on the right is taken from a closer point on the footpath. So these images were taken from the rear garden of number 13, in particularly the rear section of the rear garden, so approximately halfway along the outbuilding. Another two photos from the rear garden number 13, this time from the middle of the garden, and then from the patio to the rear of the neighbouring dwelling. The outbuilding is visible from neighbouring properties, but it is considered that the additional projection of 0.9 metres over the 1.8 metre high fence is not so significant as to warrant a refusal. So these images were taken from an upstairs window of number 13. The window is in the rear elevation. From this vantage point, it's the roof of the outbuilding which is most noticeable, not the height. The trees are still visible to either side of number 11. These plans show the floor plan of the outbuilding, together with the host dwelling and the neighbouring properties. So as you can see from the plan, there's been no internal subdivision of the outbuilding. There is no toilet, bathroom or plumbing of any sort. The use of the outbuilding providing ancillary living space is considered acceptable. So these show the elevation of the outbuilding. As you can see from the plans, it has a maximum height of 2.71 metres. So planning permission is required as the proposal breaches the height limitation imposed by permitted development rights for an outbuilding within 2 metres of the site boundary. Were the outbuilding to have a height of 2.5 metres, then it would comply with the permitted development rights with regard to height. So these two images include a red line. The elevations on the right show that line at 2.5 metres. The photo on the left is an approximate 2.5 metres up the outbuilding as you can see it from the highway. It's important to mention that neither drainage nor external materials are a criteria of the permitted development, and this outbuilding is 21 centimetres too high to comply with the height limitation of permitted development. So there is a material fallback position for the outbuilding which will be 2.1 centimetres lower. As such, the application is recommended for conditional approval. Thank you.
Thank you. We have several speakers for this item. I would like to ask Eshan Tarini and Marianne Mehmajid to come up and speak, please. I was going to say you can start speaking when you're ready. You have 4 minutes and you'll be notified when you have a minute left.
Should I press this and it's ready? Okay, shall I? So, good evening. My wife, our 6-year-old daughter and I are residents of number 13, the Royal Way, the property most impacted by this breached outbuilding. First, I want to highlight that unfortunately our entire experience with the council has been under an irrational justification that convenience has priority over lawful practices. I quote from an email from the planning department. The difference between what can be built under permitted development rights or the fallback position if we refuse this application is a legitimate consideration that we have to take into account. Such an approach only leads to a biased assessment, as evident by the case officer's report. Every, and I emphasize, every valid material reason raised by the neighbors and the Michet, Friendly Green, and Deep Cut Society have been strongly dismissed in this report. The case officer had made the decision and communicated with us weeks before a proper assessment. Their report is to support their very subjective opinion. As such, and upon citizens' advice recommendation, we have filed a formal complaint to the council, which is still open. We have shared all our concerns about this report at length with the committee members and the democratic services in an email. Now I highlight some of the objection material reasons that are dismissed in the report. First, the height and size are truly overbearing and intimidating. This outbuilding is in breach of building regulations, over 20 centimeters higher than it should be allowed, around 1 meter higher than our fence, a total height of over 2 meters and 70 centimeters. It is only 30 centimeters away from our fence. Its length is over 6 meters spread out throughout our fence. This outbuilding is visible from all parts of our garden, car park, kitchen, and our daughter's room. Our daughter refuses to go to the garden as she says she is scared of this metal-looking structure. Second, the design is not in keeping with the rural character of the neighborhood at all. The comparison with other outbuildings in this area in the case officer's report is simply ridiculous. This is the first outbuilding under the retrospective permission process in this neighborhood. Permitting it sets a precedent for more out-of-character breached outbuilding. This is a major concern among all the neighbors. Third, its appearance. When viewed from neighboring properties and the street seen further up the road is of corrugated dark gray metal. The outbuilding from the outside of the property viewed by everyone resembles a shipping container. This is especially making it intimidating for us and very difficult to mitigate. Fourth, location. The structure is located too close.
1 minute left.
Thank you. 30 centimeters to the boundary fences, which we own. This prohibits the maintenance of both the outbuilding and the fence. There is no guttering, and the rain leaks has already damaged our fence and caused dampness in our garden. Fifth, the impact of this outbuilding on the character of the area is severely negative, as highlighted by 14 objections. This is a newly developed area, and the changes such as this outbuilding shape its character. For that, we trust that the deep cut policy and vision documents will play a major role here. In conclusion, I urge the committee to consider the serious implications of this decision for everyone in our community, including the precedent that it will set. We, on behalf of many neighbors of the Royal Way and other neighborhood streets, ask that you deny this application. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Wheeler?
Thank you, and thank you for coming to talk to us this evening. I know it's very daunting. I just wondered where the structure is what is the direction? So is it to the north, south, east or west is question number one. And question number two is if there was guttering around that building, would it overhang your fence line?
The first question should be answered by the case officer. The position of the outbuilding.
To the south.
The building is to the south?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
With the drainage, we don't simply know. Like, it's been built without any care that we cannot think about in a hypothetical situation. This is what we are dealing with at the moment, and I don't know if there is any guttering. How would that work out?
Councillor Garrett?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I apologise. I couldn't come to the site visit on the day. I would have liked to see it in person. You kindly sent us an email with some videos and some pictures. I want to pick up on back to actually Councillor Wheeler's point. From what you saw the video, when it's raining, the water's flying off the side of the building and is clearly hitting the fence. And ultimately, I'm guessing, will damage the fence, because I know from experience when fences get wet, they ultimately rot. Is that the case only in severe rain, or does that happen whenever it rains?
This is in August, not even winter.
And of course, I have to point out something. This fence has already been damaged and is one time been fixed already by the Bovis supports, the company who built the house.
Because of
this.
Okay.
So it's continuous, it's already started, but it's not going to stop.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members? Thank you very much for coming out and speaking.
Thank you.
The second speaker who's objecting to this application is Stephen Haynes. Oh, sorry. Steph Haynes. Please come forward. You can speak when you're ready, and you'll be advised when your time is coming up.
Is that on? Cool. Firstly, I must say that I'm speaking on behalf of many of the residents of the Royal Way today who cannot be with us for various reasons, holidays and the like, all of whom have objected and some who felt lent upon not to make comment. So I should point that out as well. Our approach to objecting to this building is for the following reasons. It doesn't blend in, as suggested by the case officer, with the sang. However, it actually disrupts the beautiful views that we had prior to the illegal construction. Whilst the front of the construction, none of the local residents stroke neighbours can actually see this, may blend in with the environment, this is not the case for us. And we have the corrugated black iron effect of view. I live diagonally across from the outbuilding and find that the view I have of it is depressing. And in closing, I can only imagine the imposing effect that the structure has for those living directly next to it, number 13. My next door neighbours have direct view of the construction, and the disruption of the landscape that this causes is oppressive and depressing. And I'm sure many of the pictures of this have been shared. During the purchase of my own house, there were limitations put in place by Bovis Vistry solicitors. One paragraph says as follows: under the covenants and restrictions sections binding us as owners of the properties. Under Part A of the transfer, there are a number of covenants, stroke restrictions, that you must observe as the owner of the property. These are self-explanatory, and the solicitors didn't repeat them in the report that I have, but these can be requested from the solicitor at any time. Suffice to say, the following covenant was made noteworthy for this case in particular. Please note that the restriction period is 5 years from the date of purchase, and as to some of the restrictions placed upon the property, you will need to consider whether consent will be required before carrying out any works, alterations or installations. I do not think that retrospective planning is what the solicitors were meaning in their correspondence, and therefore I suspect the number 15 are in breach of the conditions of the purchase of the property. The Bovis Vistry solicitors may be interested and know that their legal terms have been breached. This isn't the first time that I've actually purchased a house from you, and I've never experienced such a hostile atmosphere that has been created by the building of this outbuilding. Previously, my neighbours have verbally given me the courtesy of letting me know that an extension of cabin outbuilding planning has been requested, and that we chat about what's going to happen and any disruptions that may occur. The planning notice would then be posted, delivered to me at the property by the council, and is either approved or disapproved. Never has a building been built with no warning or conversation, way exceeding the accepted height conditions and retrospective planning requested. By approving this, you are setting a precedent for any other property owner doing the same and reducing the woodland outlooks and disrespecting the local area, which is directly contradicting what I believe the council is so keen to achieve in Deep Cut as an area of natural woodland and beauty. Not really. This is not only the only case of development that is beyond restricted covenants. There are others contravening the legal pack as well. Finally, when buying a new build, it's an exciting time, and during this we have the opportunity to build a new community, meet new people from all walks of life. However, I feel this container outbuilding has had a negative effect on many in the new community, which has resulted in a divide. I find this an incredible shame, and had the process been followed correctly, conversations been had, then I'm sure we would find ourselves in a very different situation today. I continue to state our opinion, stronger objection to this retrospective planning at number 15, the Royal Way, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself, number 8, number 6 and number 4.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming in. Before I pass this out to the other members for questions, you said neighbours have been lent on not to speak. Can you clarify that or expand upon that?
Yeah, I think some neighbours were made to feel uncomfortable enough to not put any objections forward to the planning committee. By other neighbours who are for this building.
Members, do you have any questions of the Speaker? Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. Back to your, thank you for speaking, and as Councillor Wheeler said, it can be quite daunting, so thank you. Back to your point about the covenant, can you just read that paragraph again for me?
Sure. So I did actually get my legal documents out. Under Part A of the transfer, there are a number of covenants, in brackets, restrictions, that you must observe as owner of the property. These are self-explanatory and the solicitors didn't repeat them in the report that I have, but these can be requested from the solicitor, TP Legal, at any time. Suffice to say, the following comment was made noteworthy for this case in particular. Please note that the restriction period is 5 years from the date of purchase, and as to some of the restrictions placed upon the property, you will need to consider whether consent would be required before carrying out any works, alterations or installations.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Thank you very much for your time. We have a final speaker on this application, who is for the application. Can I ask for Agent Cosmo Ryback to come up, please?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm an architect dealing with this application, so I would like to see things in perspective. I would like to address the obvious elephant in the room. Well, in this case, the elephant is in the garden, and as every elephant is a bit big. It's bigger than expected, and I must admit that the intention behind this garden room was to have a nice garden space, and the people behind, the site owners behind this application, an elderly couple, Alan and Dawn Murphin, they wanted to have a place, well, they were exercising almost sacred British right to have a garden building. So we are spiritually in a holy ground. It's not written law. And the manufacturer planned, and they planned, to build this outbuilding within the permitted development right, so up to 2.5 meters in height. And the mistake was made, and we can't hide that. And my point is that if they wanted to exercise their permitted development rights, this outbuilding could be up to 50% of the existing garden, up to 50% of the area. It's much, much, much smaller. It's positioned, creating a gap for the residents from the northern side. And as my section proved, it's a bit higher, but it's set back from the back fence. And if we compare the outline of permitted development height and the existing building, the impact because of the bulk on neighbors is almost the same. So that's basically, these are facts from my perspective and from what could be measured. The other thing, I can't comment on the looks of the building. It's of high quality materials. The back cladding is made of dark grey corrugated metal. This could be addressed, and applicant is happy to address that. Guttering may be added. It's not a big deal if indeed, despite the setback to the back fence, the water is damaging this fence. This could be easily done. It's not a problem.
1 minute
we are
left.
happy to do that. Thank you. So, And I think that's all I had to say about this. It's just, it's from my perspective, it's measurable. It's measurable, and I'm happy to answer all your questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions to ask? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. And just to clarify, do you represent Your Extra Space Limited?
Yes, that's correct.
And you say a mistake was made and the building was bigger than expected. Who made the mistake?
The builder, manufacturer, which is the applicant for this application.
So there were plans for the builder and they built it larger than the plans?
They were no plans because they built like 50 buildings per month, roughly. And this is pretty repetitive thing for them. So they were just focusing on the outline, but the builder made a mistake when it
They could be building 50 buildings a month that are outside permitted development standards.
Most of them, yes. And yeah.
That sounds quite serious. Is there any action being taken to stop that happening again?
Can't comment on that. Mistake is obvious.
Thank you.
Councillor Garrett?
To quote the previous councillor, I wasn't expecting to speak on this, but I will now. So I'm just following on from Councillor Wilson's question and your answer. So what you're saying is this builder has built this incorrectly and potentially could be building other rooms incorrectly as well, because they obviously don't follow the plans. That's basically it, yes?
No. They didn't build this incorrectly. They built this outside of the permitted development criteria.
I must admit, I thought you just said to Councillor Wilson that it was not built correctly.
Well, the intention was to build this within the permitted development rights, but they've exceeded that.
So how often do they do that?
I don't have the statistics, but it's a rare thing.
You haven't got the statistics, but it's a rare thing.
Yes.
But how do you know it's a rare thing if you haven't got the statistics?
Because I'm the architect.
Okay.
And I deal with all those cases.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Quinn?
So you said if they wanted to put guttering on it, that would be no problem.
Yes.
I'm just wondering why guttering wasn't put on this building as standard if it's easy to do. Why did they not consider putting guttering on it?
Because at the moment is a dripping edge, which allows water runoff from the roof and is just directing this to the ground, and it's working fine.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. I want to come back on your answer to Councillor Garrett just now, because I'm getting really confused now. So when I heard your answer to Councillor Wilson, the impression I got that is these are fairly prefabricated buildings, and they're knocking them out one after the other to a common specification. And then you clarified to Councillor Wilson that that could mean that they've built 50 more of these elsewhere in the country. And then the answer to Councillor Garrett was completely different to that, that although they just built it incorrectly, or they built it correctly, but it was not within specification. I'm just getting a little bit confused. Is each of these designed individually and drawn up? You said there were no plans, so I'm assuming not, but is there standard specification outside of permitted development, or is each of these built to a different specification? I think is the question.
Mm-hmm. It's not a prefabricated building. You build this from scratch on site. And if they build 40 to 60 buildings per month, they've got different teams working on that. And some of those teams are fresh, some of those teams are learning, and most of the buildings are within permitted development rights, unless the plans are for the building which needs to be higher, like, for example, a gym or something bigger. And then you ask for, if you are within the planning application rules, you just file an application and ask for permission. And every situation is different, so it's not like off-the-shelf solution.
Councillor Garrett.
Following on from Councillor Quinn's question in reference to guttering, from what I remember of the picture we saw earlier on, it was quite close to the fence. Thank you. Is that possible to bring it back up again, please? No, I want to see the picture, the physical picture, please. Okay. So my question is, looking at the picture where there was a fence, that gap there. Yeah, okay. So, if they were to come as standard with the guttering, and it was built to the correct height in the first place, where would that guttering be? Would it be up? Would it be above or below the fence? It would still be above the fence if it had been fitted correctly with the.
It's 0.9 metres higher than the fence at the moment.
Okay.
If it was 0.5,
Yeah.
it would still be above if it was 2.5 metres high, it'd still be higher than the 1.8 metre high fence.
Okay. And with the guttering, I don't know what standard guttering width is, but with the guttering width, would that then still be on this side of the fence or that side of the fence?
So the most common diameter for guttering is 115 millimetres.
Okay.
It's got 0.36 metres gap, so it would fit entirely within the site.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the location, I'm not familiar with Royal Way, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to make the site visit. Could we just call up the map of the location of number 15 and 11, please? Thank you. What was the justification for siting the building in that corner against number 11 rather than at the bottom corner below the quadrant in the middle at the bottom? Away from number 11, from the main house at number 11?
The position of that was next to the garage and filling the gap in between number 11 and and the existing garage. So that was the most logical way, leaving the garden in one big area. That's the most natural position for a shed or a garden building on that plot.
Members, do we have any other questions?
Thank you. I have other questions, but not for the speaker. I just wanted to be clear on that.
So does anyone have any other questions for the speaker? I have one or two. The height of the building, the unit, is it too high because the base has been extended too high, or is it too high because the roof has been overbuilt?
I've asked this question to the manufacturer, and they don't know. I suspect, I suspect that they built first walls to the height of 2.5, and that was their understanding of the total height. Because if you take off the roof, which is roughly 20 centimeters thick, it is 2.5. So that is probably the mistake. So instead of just allowing 20 centimeters more for the roof to be put on top of the existing walls, they've built walls up to the 2.5.
Is there any reason why at that point they didn't decide to rectify it? Rather than put everyone through this?
Hard to say. It's just, I don't know. It just, They just did it. I asked this question, why? You're building like 50 buildings per month. What's going on? They said, that is an obvious mistake.
Thank you for your time.
It was not intentional. That's maybe because people try to be clever. And sometimes, you know, there's this unwritten rule, it's better to ask for forgiveness than for permission. Not this case.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, one more question from the Speaker, Councillor Wilson, and Councillor Thompson after.
Thank you, Chair. Just one more thing to point out. The occupiers of this property, when they bought the outbuilding from you, they understood that it would comply with permitted development rights. Is that correct? And you advised them of that?
That was, yeah, they've been told that is for, that would be built within the permitted development rights, yes.
So they were sold this by you, that it would comply with permitted development.
Sorry, say again?
They were sold this outbuilding by you, that it would comply, and the understanding that it would comply with permitted development, and it doesn't.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's why the applicant is, that's why the applicant is the manufacturer, not the site owners.
My question, I thought Councillor Wilson was going to steal my question there because it's very, very similar. I would imagine when you place an order like this and you're sent the document that you need to sign off on, it doesn't just say this is within permitted development. It would also give you the dimensions of what you're building, right? So, in the documentation that the homeowners signed off on, did it just say this will be within permitted development, or did it actually say this will be 2.5 or below meters high?
I don't believe that was in the documentation itself.
So no documentation was shared with the purchasers of this outbuilding that had the dimensions of the.
Well, from this what I remember, there were like simple 3D views of the proposed building, but without dimensions, just to show how this will look like.
Okay, interesting.
Members have no further questions. Speaker can retire. We'll put this out to debate. Oh, she wanted to. Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. It's been a while since I've sat at Planning Committee, so it's good to be back. I would like to first thank the residents who have spoken tonight. It's, as others have said, it's never easy to put yourself forward to speak, especially in such a formal setting such as the Planning Committee, so I'm very thankful that they have. To address the reasons for my call-in of this application, as set out in the agenda paper, I called this application in on the grounds of the impact on residential amenity of neighbours on the Royal Way, and that it's not in keeping with the character of the local area. I also decided to call this in due to the larger than normal number of public comments on this application. It was clear to me that residents took the time to submit comments, and therefore it should be considered by the elected representatives of the Planning Applications Committee. I would also like to thank the members that attended the site visit of the application. I have also met with residents of the Royal Way and seen the building from 13 the Royal Way. When I visited and saw this outbuilding, I was struck by the size of it. Often when we review applications like these, it can be easy to not fully understand the size of a building. The size of this building and its close proximity to the boundary with 13 has resulted in an overbearing building and negative impacts on the neighbours. You will also see from the public comments submitted by residents in the local area of the impact this building is having on the local street scene and character, and as was set out by the public speakers, as well as the building being widely seen from many parts of the Royal Way. I've also a number of concerns about the location of the outbuilding. It is very close to number 11 and to number 13 as seen by the plan on the screen right now. And any water runoff from the roof of the building runs directly onto the fence of the boundary with number 13. You may have seen an email from the public speaker how heavy rainfall is displacing water onto their property. Another concern on that point is the gap between the building and the boundaries as set out in the report, and I don't think would be suitable for an adult to get through to make external repairs to any of the building. As raised by the public speaker, the external design of the building is not in keeping with the local character set out by the deep cut vision, which I understand is council policy. And I quote, "Hard edges with buildings directly adjoining surrounding heathland will not be acceptable." During the construction of this building, I also understand that enforcement action took place, which led to this retrospective application, as it was determined to be outside of permitted development rights. This would suggest that there is cause for further concern if this application were to be granted permission. I believe that, as set out by the public speakers and by myself, there are a number of legitimate reasons to refuse this application. Impact on the local character and street scene, negative impact on residential amenity, breach of permitted development rights. However, if the committee are minded to approve this application, there are a number of conditions or informatives I think would be appropriate to be added. One, and I note condition 2, but I would request that the committee expand that condition to restrict any human habitation of this building, such as a conversion to a granny annex or other such uses, including short-term lettings. I think it would be inappropriate for a building that has been described as a garden room to then be converted into a living space. A drainage scheme to be requested, so number 2, a drainage scheme to be requested to prevent the water runoff from the roof, affecting number 13. Further understanding on the height of the building to be undertaken as set out, I think, by the questions and answers by the applicant. For the external materials to be reviewed to be in keeping with the local character of the area, especially regarding the corrugated material on the rear facing that is towards the Royal Way Road. And further, permitted development rights of 15 the Royal Way be removed in entirety. A garage is in place on 15 of the Royal Way, and now this outside garden room. I think further permitted development rights would be an overdevelopment of this site. I believe that these further conditions or informatives would provide the mitigation needed to provide some relief to the residents of the Royal Way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rise. I'll put that debate to the councillors. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. I'm coming at this from a slightly different angle, which is what are our grounds for refusing the application if we were minded to do so. The fact that there is a covenant, I have no doubt that Mr Chenier will remind us that that is not a legitimate planning concern and not something that we can take into consideration, but certainly something that I would encourage the residents and the Residents' Association to take into consideration to look to have that enforced privately. So that brings us back to whether or not there is a realistic loss of amenity space as a result of this application. The application faces is to the south of the neighbouring property, and so it will have an increased shadow, albeit in the officer's opinion marginal. It is also very dominant, and I have to say I don't blame the residents of number 15 for building it where it is, because it is less dominant in their garden, putting it behind their garage, than it is for numbers 13 and numbers 11. Because it is not, in terms of an attractive building, one certainly in some people's opinions could be classified as such. So is there sufficient grounds for us to refuse this application on the basis of loss of residential amenity? And I'm looking for anything here from the officers that I might have missed in terms of another reason for refusal. The only other thing that I can think of is that it isn't in line with the design guide for the whole of this development, and I'd like clarification on that, please, because if there is an overarching design guide, and I know that we have the expert on the design guide sitting in the back row there, who may well be able to bring that directly to our fingertips. If it's not in line with that design guide, then we have reasons for refusing it. And certainly my opinion is that it has a negative impact on the residential amenity due to its overshadowing and dominance in that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I'd like to go to Councillor Jonathan Quinn. Do you still have a question to ask?
Thank you. Yeah, I was at the site visit along with Councillor David Whitcroft and Councillor White. There are a lot of outbuildings in neighbouring houses. So that is a feature of this area, as is mentioned in the report. However, this one is the biggest. And I think first of all, it's really unfortunate that this is retrospective. It's not the fault of the occupiers, it's the fault of the vendor of the building, effectively. And I don't think it's, I think it's really disappointing that there's a plan to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. But I don't think that's probably a material factor in our decision. I think there are two material factors. One, that it is overbearing because of its height and its mass. And the other one is its design and appearance. It does look different from every other outbuilding, and it's the north side of it doesn't blend in as well. So, and it was mentioned earlier that permitted development, we can't look at drainage, and we can't look at, well, it doesn't need to include anything on drainage or external materials, but it's not permitted development. This is a full planning application. So I would just ask the officers, can we look at conditioning something on drainage and something on external materials as well? The small gap that we looked at the photo of between the back of the building and the fence, it's about 30 centimetres. There's grass there which is turning into mud, obviously, because the water just drains straight off it. The roof of the building leans from front to back, so all the water drains off the back. And it looks like it's like not their problem. They could just dump the water right beside the fence. And again, the external materials on the back, it looks like it's not their problem. They can make it look like a shipping container. So there's been no consideration of that. So maybe we could take that into consideration if we were to approve. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wilson, for your comments there. In terms of your two elements, in terms of the drainage and also materials, I think from a conditions point of view, that could be imposed as part of the application, that if members are minded to approve it tonight, those conditions can be adopted and imposed as part of any decision. And we can go into the wording a bit later on or now, if you wanted me to go into that now. So if we were minded to add a drainage condition, which would obviously put the guttering at the back of the actual outbuilding, we would ask the applicant to, like within a month of the date of this decision, the details of the guttering, the downpipe, attenuation and connection to the existing service water system shall be submitted. That could be one element and could be approved. And then materials as well could be attached as part of the application. And that could be in consultation with the chair and vice chair or the ward councillors as well as part of the condition as well. So that's my two options. I think it's worth coming back to Councillor Wheeler's points. I don't know if the case officer can put the actual last slide up on the screen. Yes, that's the one. So under PD, 2.5 metres is the height of that building. So we're only assessing the actual above area of that outbuilding as part of the application. So if we went to planning appeal, so if you're minded to refuse the application, the fallback position is up to 2.5 metres, and the planning inspectorate will basically assess that extra height on the building and what harm is that going to have when the fallback position, I know what you're going to say, Councillor Wheeler, and I'll let you have your chance in a minute, is basically that impact on the neighbours, because the fallback position is 2.5 metres and it's that extra height is what's going to be assessed, and that's what needs to be taken into the context and needs to be assessed as part of this application by members tonight.
If I can come back, please, on the residential design guide, which is part of the overall design plan.
Councillor Wheeler,
for this.
We've got asked by the council.
But it's not been responded to, Chair, which is what I'd asked for in my first question.
Councillor Quinn.
Thank you. So just a few points.
Sorry, Councillor Quinn, could you just hold for a moment? You got your answer?
Well, I haven't fully got the answer, but with respect of the development when it was being built, it obviously had to adhere to that design code. Once the development built, and then we're looking at a proposal, a planning application for an extension or outbuilding, you just have to look at the merits of that particular proposal, and we have our own residential design guide for extensions, which we have to look at. And obviously, as already discussed in some detail, we've got the PD fallback issue here. PD rights were not removed on this development. One of the questions that Councillor Rise raised was about removing PD rights now on this property. I would suggest that would be wholly unreasonable when when the difference between permitted development here is 20 centimetres. It would be unfair on the applicant if you remove permitted development rights on the rest of their property.
Sorry, we have specific design areas which form a sort of like a subset. Like we have the Wooded Hills area within Surrey Heath. We have the Edwardian housing areas within Surrey Heath. We have the Yorktown design guides within Surrey Heath. So I am assuming, and if you're going to make a categorical statement that this isn't the case, that the design guide for Mindenhurst will form part of those local residential design guide strategies. So if there is something in there around outbuildings, that would normally be considered as part of the additional design guides for that area. So are you categorically saying that it is not the case for Mindenhurst that we have any additional design guides?
Principally, the design codes for Mindenhurst were informing the development that was going to be built, the actual scope of the development parameters in terms of the built form, etc. Once the development's built, principally you're then bound by the residential design guide. But beyond that, it's perhaps difficult to impose further standards because that was not the purpose of the design code when it was put forward. It was more about the parameters of each individual estate, how that was going to work, and more about the comprehensive elements of that scheme in terms of layout and the massing, etc., rather than an individual outbuilding.
Sorry, Jonathan. Let's go ahead.
That's all right. I think the first thing to say is I accept the officer's points and obviously their experience with this. I don't think it's possible to separate the top bit of the building and only look at that. I mean, the whole report for this application is based on the building as a whole, and I think that's what we should be looking at as the committee. Having said that, I think as a committee we're used to treating retrospective applications with with suspicion, rightly because we don't want people to game the planning system. However, in this case, I think it's not an example of that. I don't think the applicant intended the building to be over the permitted development height, and they've not broken a rule by going over that height as such. The only thing that happens as a result of them building over that height is that it has to be a full planning application, and that's what we're reviewing today. So I know some of the emphasis of what the other councillors and public speakers were saying, I think, was almost suggesting they'd broken a rule by going over the permitted development height, but that's not a concern. I have to go back to what Councillor Wheeler said about looking at this building's impact on amenity. While assessing it as a whole, it's obviously an ugly building. It does look like a shipping container when viewed from the other gardens, but it doesn't have any windows overlooking. I wouldn't describe it as particularly overbearing, and I would struggle to come up with good reasons to reject this application.
Thank you, Councillor Quinn. Councillor David Whitcroft.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the record, I'm one of the local members for Mitchet and Deep Cut, but I want to make it clear that I've had no direct in-person or telephone contact with any of the objectors. As indicated earlier, I have seen obviously the emails and so forth which have come out, but I have left it to my esteemed colleague, Councillor Rise, to do the direct dealing with the objectors. The reason for that, obviously, being that I'm a member of this committee. Therefore, the comments which I'm about to make are based solely on the report in front of us and the site visit which took place earlier this week. Having made those points, I will be asking for this application to be deferred. And I will explain my detailed reasons for that in a minute if it's necessary. The overall reason is because clearly, as we've heard this evening, the issues are complex. This is not a straightforward question of an outhouse being built in somebody's garden, which comes along very, very frequently. There are issues which need to be looked at. Do you wish me to continue, or are you prepared to accept my motion, provided somebody seconds it, obviously, to defer? If you wish me to continue, I obviously will.
Councillor Whitcroft, can you continue and give us your reasoning?
Certainly. I'd like to refer members to paragraph 742 in the report. And I'd like to quote briefly from that paragraph. It says, taking into consideration the examples of other outbuildings within the street scene, it is considered that the outbuilding would have an acceptable impact on the character of the surrounding area and would not result in harm to the character of the surrounding area. Now, this is an opinion made in good faith, clearly, but it's a subjective opinion. And it's one that and clearly from what we've heard earlier this evening, a number of people who are directly impacted by the building, they clearly disagree with the opinion expressed in paragraph 742. The front of the outbuilding, as we've seen from the pictures, and which we saw the other day at the site visit, is not unattractive, let me put it that way. It's finished in wood cladding and it is quite acceptable. However, at the back of the building, facing number 13, and the street scene in Royal Way, is not clad in that way, and it's finished, as we've heard, in dark grey paint, which invariably gives it the appearance of an industrial building. And people have described it as looking like a container, and it's difficult to disagree with that description. In this regard, this clearly differs from the other existing outbuildings, including the one we've seen pictures of at number 13, which are referred to in paragraph 742, which are, generally speaking, finished quite attractively and suitable for a domestic setting, which the building from the northern aspect of the building, the subject of this application, is not. In my opinion, and as a local member, and in the opinion, as we've seen, of other residents, this industrial type finish does not have an acceptable impact on the character of the surrounding area, but it does result in harm to the character of the surrounding area, which, as we've seen, is that of a new housing estate. There is nothing industrial about the street scene in Royal Way, apart from the back of this building. I'd like to refer to paragraphs 7.5, 2 and 3, and my subjective opinion, based on the site visit, differs slightly from the judgment made about the impact on number 13. It's quoting again from the report. It says, "It is considered not to result in an adverse impact on the occupiers of this neighbouring dwelling in terms of overbearing effects, loss of outlook or loss of light." Well, it's clear to me that having what looks like what's been described as a shipping container, very accurately, which in my view is not of a modest scale, as stated at 7.5.3, it's not in a modest scale looking at it from the garden of number 13. It might be viewed as of modest scale in terms of industrial building, but that's not what we're talking about here. We have to bear in mind that it's 0.4 metres away from the boundary fence of number 13, and it projects nearly a metre above that fence. So therefore it does have an overbearing effect on the amenity of the residents of number 13. Additionally, and again this is something which has been discussed by others, the lack of appropriate guttering on the building means that rain drains into the space between 15 and 13, which clearly isn't going to do the fence any good. So turning to the conclusion of the report, it says the development is acceptable in principle. It has an acceptable impact on the character of the area and the residential amenities of the occupiers of neighbouring dwellings. The development complies with the NPPF and so on. There is no doubt in my mind that the development is acceptable in principle. I don't know that could be argued with, given the number of other outbuildings in the area. That's self-evident. But in its current form, in my opinion, and in the opinion of others immediately impacted by it, it does not have an acceptable impact on the character of the area and the residential amenities of the occupiers of neighbouring dwellings. Now, I discussed at the site visit the possibility of conditions, and was advised that that would be difficult, and probably the best way forward on this would be to seek a deferral, which is what I'm doing for the reasons which I have just given. Do you want me to go banging on, or have I said enough?
Unless you want to, I think you've made your point.
I don't want to try the patience of the committee, because it's a very busy agenda. But it seems to me that a deferral would allow time for negotiations to take place with the neighbours and indeed the applicant, to see if the applicant, and we've heard earlier that the possibilities are quite strong, if the applicant would be prepared to adjust the building to make it more acceptable. Whether or not that's going to be acceptable to in planning terms remains to be seen, but that is my proposal. Thank you. And hopefully somebody might second it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to suggest that if we weren't going to defer, that we've already discussed a condition applying to materials. I wondered if that condition could be extended to the roof material, and maybe it could be planted to soften the effect of the property. If you take a look at the photo taken from the first floor on number 13, facing directly outwards, you see the black roof. It's hideous, to be honest. If we could, and it is industrial, if that could be softened maybe with a material that, like a sedum dressed into the roof, that might soften the impact and improve its biodiversity as well. Open for discussion on that with my colleagues.
Thank you. Councillor White.
At the site visit, as we walked into the garden of number 15, you sort of wondered where the building was, and then you saw that it was discreetly put by the side of the garage. From the garden, it looks really, really nice, I have to say. But when you got out onto the street, it did look, and nobody's used the word yet, it looked ugly. If there was some way that it could be conditioned that is softened by the cladding being put all the way round instead of just on the bits that can be seen from the garden, I don't know whether that would go part way to helping the residents, but it does look ugly from the other garden and the road.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft. Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you. I think it's important to start by, because obviously there's lots of residents in today, understanding the process we have to go through. Unless we've got a very, very good planning reason not to accept this, we have to approve the request of the officers. And I think we've discussed in this chamber many times heart versus head, unfortunately. That being said, I'm going to do something I can't believe I'm doing. I actually agree with Councillor Wilson, and I apologise because I'm never ever going to do that again. And I like that recorded, but I actually agree with what Councillor Wilson has highlighted as some conditions. I think you said ugly. It says in the paper modest scale. I don't think there's anything modest about this this carbuncle. I think our now king used the word carbuncle in the past. It is ugly. It is not attractive at all. If I was living next door to it, I would not feel in the slightest bit that I want to live there. I have a question. I know this is going to go down like a lead balloon, and I know that it's probably something you're going to tell me we're not going to prepare to answer. If this came as a planning application, as it stood originally before it ever got built, would we have approved it? Because if we wouldn't have approved it, if it had come as a normal application, why would we approve it now? I know it's because it's permitted development, it's built over the size it should be, and I get all of that, and I get all the arguments that Gavin has said that if we refuse it and we send it to the appeal, it will come back and it will probably get the appeal will probably get dismissed, and unfortunately there's nothing we can do about that. But I just want to get an understanding, if this had come as a normal application, as it stands, as it is in the garden now, would we have approved it?
Councillor Garrett, the application has come forward in front of members tonight as a planning application, and we've put reasons in our report, the reasons why we feel the application is acceptable. So it's come forward, so it's actually an application come forward. So we've used the fallback position in terms of the PD to justify we're only actually assessing extra height as part of the outbuilding. So that's the reason why it's come forward for approval tonight.
Follow-up question. If there was a suggestion that work needs to be done to this, because there's lots of conditions that we're throwing in and all that, and I know it's a difficult one for us to ask, but I think it's something it would be worth finding out. Who is going to pay for that? I'm assuming the resident is going to pay for it, because they basically didn't get what they ordered. And I know that's not within our gift, but if we're putting all these conditions on something that the resident has got, then who's going to pay for that?
Those matters between how it was built from what they ordered is irrelevant to the planning process here. all we can purely look at is there a remedy to what you see out on site, what the proposal is, and if you as councillors feel that conditions will address that, then so be it.
Councillor Thompson first, and then Councillor Helen.
Thank you, Chair. We've talked a lot about permitted development tonight, and you've mentioned that we should be, we're judging this application as we see it. So the way I see it is we shouldn't even be considering permitted development, the fact that it's 20 centimetres more or not. We should be looking at it as if it was a brand new planning application and judging it in the same way we'd be judging any new planning application, because it's come before the planning committee and we're judging it on planning law as per the rules that we are all we all apply. So the fact that it would have just gone through without any scrutiny if it was just a bit smaller, to me is a moot point. We talk about head and heart. I personally would be devastated if this was sprung up in a garden opposite me, and certainly from my head and my heart, I would be minded to refuse this application for the reasons that has been spoken about. Councillor Rice mentioned that it's visible from the street, so it does impact the street scene. It's not in keeping with the rest of the development, and these are the kinds of reasons that we refuse other planning applications all the time. So I would like to re-ask the question that Councillor Wheeler asked is, are these not valid reasons for us to refuse this application? I don't think deferring this application is going to, it's just kicking the can down the road. Without getting the architect back to tell us how feasible it is, completely change the look and feel of it with cladding around the back. I feel that we need to make a decision on this rather than defer it.
I can only advise members of our legal judgment here in terms of the application. We're only looking at that extra 20 centimetres in terms of the impact. If it goes to appeal, the planning inspectorate will look at the fallback position in terms of this 2.5 metre height and will assess it, what is the impact of that extra height on top of that outbuilding. It's a material consideration to members tonight to actually consider that and what harm that has in terms of the overall impact of this development.
Helen.
After you were swapping games.
I've got two, sorry, I can hear an echo. I've got two sort of questions for this. Firstly, and this will be a procedure thing, is it possible to ask questions again of the architect now?
No.
Because what I'd like to know is whether we're talking about adding cladding and adding onto the roof and what have you. What I'd like to know is whether with a building of that kind, that can actually be done. Because if we're sitting talking about adding cladding, but actually the reality of it is that cladding cannot be added to that building, we're actually...
He did actually say that could be done.
It can all be done?
He said the guttering and the additional cladding can be done.
Okay, and the other question, I'd like to go back to Councillor Wheeler's comments about the reasons for objection. She came up with two, and she asked with two reasons, and she asked Miss Bishop about, in an indirect way, about the design guide. Could we, if we were minded to defer, could we defer also on the basis that we go back to the design guide and again check that out? Because Mr. Partington said that there was part of an answer to that. And if we're going to defer, could we not defer on the grounds of having another look at that as well? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Partington.
I mean, it really comes back to the answer I've already given, that principally it was more a design code for how the development was going to be laid out, the parameters of the development that were going to come forward. In terms of individual then extensions that are allowed in the future, that's less of an issue to do with that initial SPD. It's more of an issue to do with the residential design guide, which we have for the whole borough, how you apply that, how you look at generally those issues of overbearing effects, etc., and the impact on the character of the area, rather than going back to that SPD from the original deep cut estate.
Okay, could I come back? Is there anything across the borough as a whole in terms of the design of this building that we could rely to in terms of appeal?
Well, principally, we'd rely on policy DM9, which is the main design policy, but that's quite generic in terms of what it talks about in terms of, for example, protecting residential amenities. The SPD is the residential design guide. The residential design guide has in principles to do with extensions, and you would also tie it against those principles to do with extensions.
Okay, so could that not be the third reason for appeal that Councillor Wheeler was referring to?
So, to be clear, I mean, I think I've already answered in terms of what the differences are here between the SPD, which was on the original deep cut estate, and the supplementary guidance, which is the residential design guide, just adds to policy DM9, and it talks about overbearing effects, etc. It adds more further weight to the policy, and that's what a supplementary planning document does. It just adds further weight to your principal policy. So that's effectively what that residential design guide is doing. So if you refused it, you would make reference to that residential design guide as well.
Can I go back, Victoria? Could you go through again? You had two, and you asked a question about the last one.
So yeah, I'm happy to, and I actually have a supplementary question, which is what is the overall permitted development kind of gross internal space that is permitted? Because I have to say I'm surprised that the width and splay of this one is within permitted development grounds. Having looked at the design guide for Mindenhurst, I cannot find anything which is stated in relation to garden sheds. Otherwise, I would have come back. But I am sure that if there is, our expert in the back row I'd be really grateful if that could be confirmed, because I know that you have been living and breathing this site for as long, almost as I have been, in fact, longer, I think, than I've been a councillor. So that would be very grateful. The other one is on its overbearing impact on residential amenity. There is reference within the guide line to Royal Way, and the fact that that should be downgraded and fairly rural because it's the entrance to the Sang. And I don't know if there's a little bit of leeway there on the very industrial nature of this building from the street scene, and whether or not that could be argued in addition as an additional reason for refusal. But the design guide does not appear to be binding as it's not like our supplementary guides that we have for other character areas within the borough that I can see.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I'd like to put that to Sean Garrett, the last word.
Thank you. I've got a very small question, Gavin. It goes back to your point about the very small difference. If we were to approve this tonight, does that then set a precedent for anybody else wanting to build a similar building in their garden, which means, well, they've got one, so we can build one of the same size?
It could potentially happen in terms of that, but also I've heard tonight from members that they want betterment in terms of this application, and there's two elements which I'm hearing from members tonight: is how the appearance of the building actually looks in terms of the materials, the cladding, and also the issues in terms of drainage as well. And as Councillor Wilson and other councillors have already mentioned a lot today in the chamber, those conditions can be added in consultation with the Vice Chair and Chair in terms of the final wording of those conditions.
Sorry, I've just not had a response on the square footage thing around permitted development.
Do you want me to go? So to do with permitted development, you can cover up to 50% of a curtilage excluding the original dwelling. In this case, that would also include the garage. It also includes the entirety of the curtilage, so what's outlined in red there, which includes the front garden and the driveway. So that would be more than half the rear garden could get covered in an outbuilding. The maximum height for outbuildings is 4 metres. If they are greater than 2 metres from the boundary, it goes down to 2.5 within 2 metres of the boundary. So the extent that they could cover the property with is large.
Last word, Councillor Wilson, sorry.
I just want to make another point if it went to appeal. Now, we know that the agents has already said they'd be willing to look at options in terms of cladding. They'd also be willing to look at options in terms of guttering. It could be within the gift of an inspector to impose conditions for that betterment if that inspector saw it as fit, rather than refusal or dismissal of that appeal. So you also have to bear that in mind, that an inspector could still look at it and go, actually, this can be addressed by condition, rather than dismissing the appeal.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I think I was just about to go on to that subject of what would be deemed reasonable by the inspector at appeal. I mean, the officers have already recommended acceptance without these conditions that the committee would obviously clearly like to see. So the inspector seems unlikely that the inspector would agree with our decision if we refuse this. I just wondered, could the officers expand a little bit more on what would be reasonable? You've said that the 2 possible conditions would be reasonable, but it wouldn't be reasonable to remove permitted development rights from number 15. And is there anything else that would be reasonable, like conditioning something on the roof of the building? Anything like that? And I'm sorry to drag on, but I'll be happy to propose the officers' recommendations with the conditions. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder for that? Sorry, Councillor Rice.
Am I allowed to? I appreciate I'm not a member of this committee. Am I allowed to come back with further questions?
It's been going on
I have
quite
2
a while.
questions.
As long as you're really quick.
Yep. The first question is, where in the residential design guide does it talk about external cladding that resembles an industrial building? I think that's been discussed many times. And also, if this report is solely to address the extra height above the building, why is the committee being presented with the entire application? Because I think it's important that they should take the application as a whole. It is a planning application, not be told that you can only really address the 21 centimetres. I think that's a bit disingenuous. Thank you.
Councillor Quinn.
And can I have answers to those questions, please?
I'll also get back to you in a moment.
Oh, sorry. Did you want me to speak, Chair, now?
So Councillor Rides, I mean, I think I've explained in terms of the PD4 back here, in terms of the height of the actual building, and we've mentioned about the betterment in terms of the conditions which can be imposed. I'm just a bit unclear about what you're asking for here.
So what I'm asking for is that it's being referred to that the residential design guide is what would be referred to if this was sent to appeal. However, where in the residential design guide does it talk about having external materials that would resemble an industrial building, which is what the external building, the external facing to number 13, that's what it resembles. If this building came as a design, as a new building, I do not believe that the planning officers would recommend that external material for approval. So I just want clarity where in the design guide it would give that recommendation for approval.
I mean, it doesn't explicitly say about that. I mean, we made a judgment in terms of the appearance of the building. We thought it was acceptable, hence why we put it forward to members for approval. It's down to members to decide if they feel it's unacceptable. We've given reasons to better the actual appearance of the building, in terms of the betterment, in terms of the cladding. But if you feel that's not appropriate, then the application should be refused. But we as officers can only give you our professional judgment. We're giving you technical assessments as part of the assessment of the application. So if you feel that our assessment is incorrect, then you have to come with justifiable reasons to refuse it, because essentially, as Mr Parton has already said tonight, those conditions could be imposed as part of a approval at the planning inspectorate if it was refused tonight and it went to the planning inspectorate and it was allowed as well. So we are trying to make it better. We've put forward an application we feel is acceptable, but members have raised concerns about the cladding and about the appearance, and those conditions would basically rectify those issues.
Just one final comment. My final word is that I do take that point, but I refuse to believe that if a new building was being built anywhere in this borough and they had that external face material that is there, it would not have come to this committee with a recommendation for approval. That would have been addressed in the pre-application stage. So the fact is, because this is a retrospective planning permission application, despite all of the assurances made by the applicant, I still do not believe that has been addressed appropriately by officers before this application has come to committee. And if the committee was minded to give approval, there is nothing in this report that ensures that the betterments are made unless those conditions are implemented. So we can say we all want it, and the applicant can say that they're willing to do it, but unless we as the council enforce that, it won't. There is no guarantee that it happens, and then it will stay the same. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
And I understand your concerns on that point, Councillor Rise. If members did decide to grant the application with the conditions, and the applicant did not actually impose those conditions, did not actually comply with those conditions, then obviously enforcement action would be taken against the applicant for not actually making that appearance of that building better. So that would be the process here.
I'm going to say it's not in the report, and I've not heard a condition suggested about. I've heard about the guttering, which I agree with, and I've heard the applicant say he's willing to do it, but I will want to see the condition, and I'm concerned that.
I can read it out.
Fine, but I'm concerned that unless.
You want to hear it now?
Yes, I do.
On.
Yeah, there is. It's a month. Yeah. So there's two conditions. So the first condition, I'll start off with drainage. So within 1 month of the date of this decision, details of guttering, downpipe, attenuation and connection to the existing service water system shall be submitted to and approved by local planning authority. Once approved, these details shall be installed within 2 months of these details being agreed to facilitate the rainwater collection. And the reason is to create sustainable development and to ensure development accords with DM10 of the core strategy. So that's the drainage condition. The second condition, relating to materials, states within 1 month of the date of this decision, details of the cladding shall be submitted to and approved by the local planning authority. Once approved, these details shall be installed within 2 months of this details being agreed. Reasons, in the interest of visual amenities of the area which are called to DM9 of the core strategy. There are 2 conditions.
Councillor Rise, as a ward councillor, does that sound acceptable?
I am not a decision maker, so it's not appropriate for me to provide.
I'm just asking.
I'm not go. My personal ones is I don't think they go far enough, but I'm not the decision maker on this.
Thank you. Councillor Quinn.
Thank you, Chair. I kind of agreed with Councillor Rise making it clear and asking officers to read out what the conditions were, because I wasn't entirely sure of the wording of them myself. So thank you for that. I'd just like to note that I know Councillor Rise suggested expanding the condition to restrict occupation and short-term lettings. Are we satisfied, is the committee satisfied with the wording of the already existing condition in the report? That's a question to consider. I think maybe the wording's good enough, but it could be tightened slightly. And additionally, you've addressed the cladding round the building. We've not talked about softening the roof. Is that something that we want to specify in a condition? I think that's what the committee might be minded to include as well.
That can be added as part of the materials condition, and I think, has the officer got some wording there?
Pretty much the same as the materials, it's just... So yeah, I did draft one for the roof to do with the cedar roof, green roof, again following the same date. So within 1 month of the decision, we get the details, and once approved, the details were installed within 2 months.
Councillor Garrett. I think we need to proceed and vote on granting it with conditions.
I'm thinking back to Councillor Rice's comment initially about further permitted development. I understand what Mr Partington was saying about it being unreasonable, but I would like that condition to be added.
I think Mr Partington made it quite clear that would be unreasonable to add it.
It's up to members to decide whether they believe that is unreasonable or not, whether they wish to support Mr Partington's decision.
To put it another way, there could be other properties which would extend largely over their garden at the back, be within PD. They could do up to 50%, but we can't take away their PD rights. It's therefore unfair to take away the PD rights on this property. And it wasn't done when the estate was originally done. That's the way to do it. And even then, when you remove PD rights, you've got to have very strong reasons for doing it, because the government says in most circumstances it's not reasonable. Unless you've got that strong justification in for a new estate to remove those permitted development rights, 9 times out of 10, if they appealed that condition, it would simply be allowed.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Just one final thing. We haven't heard from the guru on this area for absolute confirmation that there is nothing there around the building of large sheds in back gardens. So I'd be very grateful. I can see that she's got exactly the piece there, and I think that will either will give us all some assurance and reassurance. I hope that there is nothing else that we could do to protect neighbours from this carbuncle.
In terms of the overall deep cut development, we have an overarching site-wide design code. Within that, the subsequent, the early phases, which included the Vistry parcel that we have, also had a site-specific design code. But that was to inform the overall development of the new residential development. There is minimal reference to anything that happens afterwards. That is where when we deal with the reserved matters applications, if we want to control matters, that's where we do it.
Thank you.
Members, do I have anybody who would like to propose the conditions and grant this? Councillor Wilson, do we have a second? Councillor Quinn. Okay, can we put that to the vote, please? Okay, all those in favour of granting? Subject to the conditions as listed. With the 3 conditions. So as that's not unanimous, we need to just do a named vote.
So this is for the officer's recommendation to grant subject to conditions discussed by the chair and the head of planning. So put your hands up if you're for. So Councillor Helen Whitcroft. Yes. Councillor Sean Garrett.
Against.
Councillor Mary Glowett.
Abstaining.
Councillor Liz Noble.
For with the condition.
Councillor David O'Mahony.
For.
Councillor Jonathan Quinn.
For.
Councillor Kevin Thompson.
Against.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Against.
Councillor David Whitcroft.
Against.
Councillor Valerie White.
Against.
And Councillor Richard Wilson.
For.
So that's 4 for, 6 against and 1 abstention.
So that's not passed. The officer's recommendation to grant with conditions. Members now discuss an alternative proposal that can be made. Or a deferral as an option. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose that the application is refused on the basis of its overall mass and bearing on residential amenity, its impact on the street scene. And I think that will probably just about do it. Thank you.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
I'd like to second that, please.
Councillor Wheeler, can you repeat the precise wording, please, again?
I can have a go, Chair. So that we are refusing the application on the basis of its impact on on the neighbour's residential amenity and street scene due to the building's height, dense and industrial appearance.
So when you say residential amenity, what do you actually specify residential? Because we need to defend that as part of the council. What impact are you saying on residential amenity?
So it's the impact of the neighbour's ability to enjoy their residential amenity due to height. Presumably there is light loss given that it's on the southern boundary, so there would be an impact there. But its overall bearing and mass. I appreciate that there is going to be a counter-argument that says that they could build from one end to the other, but we're not considering that here. We are considering just that application, which is very industrial by nature.
I am basically looking at the council's position here on this appeal. No, as officers, we have to defend your decision as members, okay? I know you've got your decision here, but I need reasons, specific reasons, you're saying a loss of light to what?
So
What is a loss of light to what?
I'm going to say loss of residential, impact on residential amenity, Mr. Chinier, because the impact on residential amenity has appeared in other planning applications that have been refused on those grounds without any further clarification or classification. Not the only member in the room. I'm very happy for other people to come in. So my proposal is the impact on residential amenity and the negative impact on the street scene. And that is what I'm suggesting that I would put forward as the reason for refusal, given that the members within the chamber have decided to refuse it.
So it's two reasons. So it's one's loss of amenity, and then what's the other, mass and character?
So it's impact on residential amenity and impact on the street scene.
Okay, be used as valid reasons.
So I've got one reason is mass and character and impact on the street scene. And the second one is loss of residential amenity. And just come back to you, Councillor Wheeler, in terms of residential amenity, what are you saying in terms of which property are you saying there's loss of amenity to?
So there is an impact on, in particular, on property number 13.
Okay.
Councillor Thompson.
So in the conclusion, the officer's conclusion, it says it has an acceptable impact on the character of the area and the residential amenities of the occupiers of neighbouring dwellings. So they are clearly considered to be planning, that's a planning decision or a planning opinion. And we are disagreeing with that opinion. So they are the two reasons we're giving. It does not have an acceptable impact on the character of the area, and it has a detrimental effect on the residential amenities of occupying of neighbouring dwellings.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft, last.
Slight sideways, can retrospective decisions actually be appealed?
Yes, they can.
So if the members are willing, we can vote on this as a refusal to not accept the officer's recommendation based on the mass and the size of the building and loss of public amenity, mainly to number 15?
13.
Number 13. Could I have a proposer and a seconder for that? Councillor Wheeler, proposer. Councillor White, seconder. And now we vote.
So this is voting for or against refusal based on the conditions the chair's just discussed. Councillor Helen Whitcroft. So you're voting for or against or abstaining the refusal.
I'm not guiding her, I'm just telling you what. I'm not under influence at all.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
I'm for.
Councillor Mary Glowett. Councillor Liz Noble. Councillor Jonathan Quinn. Councillor David O'Mahony.
Against.
Councillor Kevin Thompson. Councillor Victoria Wheeler. Councillor David Whitcroft. Councillor Valerie White. And Councillor Richard Wilson.
Against.
So that's 8 for and 3 against to reject the officer's recommendation and to propose the recommendation to refuse based on the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members. We'll confirm the final wording with the Planning Department and the Chair. Thank you. Okay, if you're all happy, we'll proceed on to the next application, which is land east of St Margaret, Woodlands Lane. Just to catch up. Yeah, can I confirm there are no declarations of interest? I have received an email from some neighbours, and I think it was Falcon Developments. Is everybody else the same? Neville, you can go ahead and present this.
Thank you, Chair. The application relates to land east of St Margaret's, Woodlands Lane, Windlesham. It is being reported before the committee as it is a major application. The proposal seeks the development of this land for 20 residential dwellings, together with associated access, car parking and landscaping. The application site is an undeveloped parcel of land measuring approximately 0.77 hectares in size, situated on the northern side of Woodlands Lane. To the north is the recently approved Heath Park Wood development for 116 homes. To the east is the detached dwelling of St Margaret's, with the Ferns detached dwelling situated east of this. To the south is Woodlands Lane, the public highway, whilst beyond this is an open field. To the west is Woodlands Cottage, another detached dwelling. The settlement of Windlesham lies approximately 165 metres to the west of the site. Access to the site is provided from the south-east. The land forms part of a housing reserve site, forms part of the council's 5-year housing land supply, is situated within the countryside beyond the green belt, and is within a flood zone 1. The site is covered largely by low quality trees, with the higher quality trees situated to the front of the site. The whole of the land is, however, covered by a tree preservation order. These photos show some views from in and around the site. The image to the top left shows the frontage of the site with Woodlands Lane, with the entrance to the adjacent St Margaret's property to the west. The image to the top right shows the entry gate adjacent to the site entrance for Woodlands Cottage to the east. The tree coverage within the site can be seen in the 2 images to the bottom of the slide. It's also useful to consider the proposal in context of its wider surroundings. The settlement of Windlesham is situated 165 metres to the west of the site, equivalent of a 3-minute walk on the public footpath which runs parallel to the site. The Heath Park Wood development for 116 homes, as shown on the image to the left, has been granted reserved matters and is material to the context of the character of the application site. This shows the proposed site plan. The proposed 20 dwellings are orientated around the access road which runs through the centre of the site and results in a new access point being created from Woodlands Lane, providing a single entry exit from the site. All properties would benefit from car parking, amenity space, level street access and access to dedicated play space. To facilitate the development, 3 groups of trees and 1 woodland area would need to be cleared. However, these are low quality trees which have been planted too close to one another. The proposal would offset this impact through the planting of 61 new trees on site, together with biodiversity net gain off-site in the locality, providing a total of 27.64% habitat gain and 100% gain in hedgerow units. The dwellings would have generous separation distances between the shared boundaries of the site and to the nearest residential properties at St Margaret's and Woodlands Cottages, respectively. The development would be made up of 7 2-bedroom dwellings and 13 3-bedroom dwellings. 2 and 3-bedroom dwellings are identified within the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan as priority housing, which the development contributes towards. It would have a density of 26.7 dwellings per hectare, which is less than the 31 dwellings per hectare found 165 metres to the west of the site. All dwellings would meet or exceed the technical space standards, as well as meeting the private amenity space requirements in accordance with the Council's residential design guide, resulting in a good quality accommodation for future residents. There would be a total of 53 total parking spaces provided, 2 for each 2-bedroom unit and 3 for each 3-bedroom unit, in accordance with the requirements of the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan. No garages are provided. All dwellings would also benefit from dedicated cycle and refuse storage, as well as an EV charging point in accordance with Surrey County Council highway standards. The proposal would provide 100% affordable housing in the form of 10 affordable rented units and 10 shared ownership units, providing an excess of the policy requirement for 8 units total. The proposed bedroom and tenure mix of development is in line with the findings of the Council's latest housing needs assessment. The image to the top shows the street scene from Woodlands Lane, whilst the image to the bottom shows the street scene within the site. The new access within the site has been purposely designed to sit centrally away from the access points of either adjacent development, reducing its potential impact on the street scene, whilst the verdant character of Woodlands Lane is also preserved by the retention of the mature tree frontage. A new tree planting within the site has been strategically placed around the access road to ensure that views within the site are towards the new planting, softening the overall appearance of the development. The layout of the development allows for good spacing between and around the dwellings in line with the character of the area and the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan, as well as allowing for good quality landscaping. The Council's urban design consultant raises no objections to the proposal. These are some images to the various front elevations of the properties. Whilst there is a single architectural theme, there are various subtle differences in the design and appearance of the dwellings. Through the roof forms, use of render, brick detailing and window reveals that add texture and interest to the dwellings, contributing towards the positive street scene within the site. To summarise, the application site forms part of the Council's 5-year housing land supply, expected to deliver 20 units as proposed today. It also forms part of a housing reserve site, and together these factors result in an expectation that residential development would come forward on this site. The site provides a mix of homes that is considered priority housing within the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan, whilst providing in excess affordable housing provision, as well as providing a bedroom mix and tenure of housing that is in line with the Council's needs as set out in the Housing Needs Assessment. The proposal also provides a total of 27.64% habitat gain and 100% gain in hedgerow units, despite not being subject to mandatory biodiversity net gain requirements. All dwellings would meet the relevant internal and external space standards and requirements, with the design having been amended on the advice of the Council's urban design consultant, who raises no objections to the proposal. The proposal raises no undue impact to neighbouring occupiers, whilst providing car park in line with Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan requirements. No objections are raised from Surrey County Highways, the LLFA or Surrey Wildlife Trust. The application has therefore demonstrated that it would have overall planning benefit, and officers recommend a grant of approval subject to conditions and the signing of the legal agreement, securing the biodiversity net gain of site, sound mitigation measures and affordable housing provision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rahman. We have several speakers on this evening. Can I ask for Tony Murphy to come forward and speak? Tony Murphy? We have several speakers this evening. Can I ask if Tony Murphy can come forward?
This application has been lying dormant for the past 19 months. It is out of time on the statutory time limits and must be seen as speculative in relation to its timing in advance of the proposed local plan, with 2 further stages, including examination before adoption, and in advance of appeal decisions on the related Ferns and St Margaret appeals against Council's wise and supportable decisions to refuse, both precedents. Whilst every application will be considered on its own merits, they must also be considered within a context and as part of the cumulative effect on the surroundings. The context is a semi-rural village with limited facilities, including what is very limited public transport. This application will extend the village boundaries with further urbanisation. The already approved 116 homes with 40% affordable on the related land known as land to the east of Heath Park Drive must be seen as coming to commencement soon, more than 7 years from being allowed. It will significantly stretch the current infrastructure and facilities, but is a contribution to any local need for affordables, whatever that may mean in practice in this locality. It's contrary to Council's declared policy to focus development on the western part of the borough, where there are existing and growing facilities with good public transport and employment opportunities. It's contrary to the policies of the Windlesham Neighbourhood Development Plan. I commend to members the authority's own appeal statement in relation to 230486, the Ferns, with its detailed support of Council's decision to refuse. I have admiration for its depiction of place and the negative impact this development would have. And there is strong support within it for neighbourhood plans in general and for the Windlesham Neighbourhood Development Plan in particular. Related to the environment aspect discussed, especially the heavily wooded nature of the site, I was also impressed with the urban design response on 16th of June 23, which disapproved of the proposal without, at the time, considering the Ferns and St Margaret's, which would add to their concerns. But most importantly, in my very strongly held view, members must consider the public health problems of a housing development in such close proximity to the M3 motorway, well recognised as the main source of air and noise pollution in the borough. The site's nearest point is 41 metres from the M3 and the first dwelling is 63 metres from it, both well within the dispersion area of NO2. And the excessive noise pollution requires significant noise mitigation as a condition in view of what are described as sensitive receptors, a dehumanization which deflects from its meaning sensitive people. That is, the developing young and others with conditions sensitive to air pollution and all residents who would need protection from the impact of noise. A life where the windows will remain shut and children will be advised to play indoors. Members, please refuse this application.
Thank you, Mr Murphy, for your time. Members, do you have any questions of the Speaker? Thank you, Mr Murphy. We have additional speaker tonight, Sandy Reid, who will speak on behalf of Windlesham Heath Park Wood, and I believe she's online.
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Oh, and now we can see you.
Good.
Okay, you have 4 minutes to speak, and you've been notified when you have a minute left.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Firstly, this application is out of date according to Article 34 of the Town and County Planning Act and should have been dealt with in the prescribed timescales. There is a failure to comply with the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan, which is incorporated into the SHBC Development Plan. The case officer would have us believe that the WNP and the SHBC Development Plan are separate entities and that one can be put above the other, but they are not mutually exclusive. There is confusion about the settlement area, which the case officer incorrectly claims is not in the WNP village area, which it is. Certain parking spaces and internal garages on the plans do not comply with the WNP. This is overdevelopment. Windlesham is currently due to provide 116 houses to the council housing supply figures, 54 of which have been promised to be affordable. This compares to the 20 planned for in the WNP, even allowing for current housing requirements to require 6 times that from a village that is underserved by amenities cannot be seen as good or fair practice. 2 of the adjacent sites, St Margaret's and the Ferns, the latter omitted from the case officer's report, were recently refused on grounds of density and non-compliance. This site should have the same outcome. The case officer states this is a housing reserve site, but its purpose was intended to only be used as a last resort in the event of a failure in land supply. As he also states the supply is 7.141 years, the case for this site even coming forward has not been proved, especially when the council's stated aim is to focus development in the west of the borough. The council are considering this application in isolation and before other development applications in Woodlands Lane have been finalised. We are advised that this approach is technically illegal as the cumulative impact of a proposed development together with the impact of an approved neighbouring development is a material planning consideration. There are many examples in the case officer's report where it states this application stands on its own merit, for example, the access road. It also describes Woodland Lane as having a continuous pedestrian footpath. With current developments planned or at appeal, all requiring access roads, potentially this leads to 4 access roads within approximately 180 metres. Car movements are listed as 8 to 10 two-way trips. This is in total isolation of car movements from the planned properties of Heath Park Wood, plus the other possible developments. As the case officer recognises, journeys to doctor's surgeries, dentists, supermarkets, etc. all have to be completed by car. On this short piece of road, there will be nothing other than car movements. These properties will be within 70 metres of the M3. What message is being sent to potential residents that this location, close to noise and vehicle pollution, is suitable to raise a family? There is an evident failure to show a duty of care for public health. The development further removes numerous trees from Heath Park Wood, trees that provide a noise and pollution barrier to the M3. The arboricultural officer raises an objection on the loss of TPO trees due to harm on the long-term character of the woodland. Heath Park Wood has been described by our MP as the lungs of Windlesham. Surrey Nature Recovery has confirmed a 33% decline in wood wildlife species. A decision to grant this application will have a long-term negative effect on this area and on public and environmental health. With this in mind and the legal issues we have raised, this application should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions of the Speaker? Thank you very much for your time. Members, do you have any questions of the officers?
Speaking. Oh, sorry.
So we have one final speaker. David Hames will be speaking on behalf of the applicants, Vulcan Developments. Start when you're ready. You have 4 minutes and you'll be notified when you have the minute to go.
Thank you, Chair, members. By way of an introduction, I am David Holmes and I'm speaking on behalf of the applicants, Vulcan Developments. I'll attempt to keep this brief as to not simply repeat what's set out in your officers' committee report. The application before you proposes to deliver 20 affordable homes, split 50-50 between affordable rented and shared ownership tenures, which would not only assist the council in meeting their affordable housing needs, it would also provide new homes to those in critical need. The application site is part of the wider housing reserve site and also features as a draft allocation within the Regulation 19 local plan, which will ultimately be submitted for examination, and therefore, as a matter of principle, residential development of this site is accepted. As the site is included as an allocation, officers accept that the site's delivery is needed to meet the ongoing housing needs of the borough. In recognition of the trees lost as part of this development, the applicant is proposing to plant a further 60 trees on site and 1,350 new trees off-site, which brings a significant net gain in both habitat biodiversity units and hedgerow biodiversity units. Such a gain weighs in favour of granting planning permission. Significant work has gone into the design of the proposal, which has evolved over the course of the application process. The application proposes a lower site coverage and a greater setback from the road than other applications on sites fronting Woodlands Lane, and overall seeks to deliver a spacious scheme with integrated open space. The Council's technical consultees, including their urban design consultant, have endorsed the submission, and we can confirm that we are working with a registered provider of affordable housing to deliver the scheme in the event planning permission is granted. Apologies to labour the point regarding affordable housing. However, historically, in the borough, delivery of new affordable housing has fallen significantly short of actual need. The application before you provides an opportunity to meet a significant amount of the borough's annual affordable housing needs. The need for affordable housing is real and pressing. However, I'd ask members to look beyond just the facts and figures in this case. I've been involved in the delivery of over 800 new affordable homes in London and the South East. Seeing such new houses being made into homes and being able to assist in addressing the housing crisis, albeit in a small way, is humbling. Being able to provide new homes for those in the greatest need is a significant material consideration that weighs in favour of granting planning permission. To conclude, the application has been assessed by your officers as being compliant with local and national planning policy. The design has evolved to greater respect its setting. Should the committee endorse the officer's recommendation for approval, I can confirm it will be delivered and will provide the benefits that affordable housing brings. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, David. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor White.
Thank you. Can you give me your definition of affordable housing, please?
Yes, no problem at all. It's in conformity with the National Planning Policy's definition of affordable housing. So 50% of them are shared ownership dwellings, and 50% of them will be affordable rented. Affordable, as prescribed nationally, is up to 80% of open market rents. The actual cap on that is dictated locally by housing officers in conjunction with the housing association that will be delivering the product.
Councillor Wheeler.
I don't think I was next, actually. I think I'm almost last to go. I'm being very honest here. I know that the two hands to my right.
Thank you, Chair. You said this site will be delivered. Do you have any timescales when, if this was approved tonight, when you would look to start the work?
So subject to signing the Section 106 and clearing pre-commencement conditions, we'd look to get on site as soon as possible. I would say within 3 to 6 months of as we sit here today, depending on how long the rest of those applications take.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. On the same sort of subject, you do say that delivery of affordable homes falls short of need, and we're all acutely aware of that. One of the reasons that it falls short is that developments that are approved for affordable homes are often not viable and don't take place. There was one on the opposite side of Woodlands Lane years ago. Is this development viable? Is there a profit in it for the developer?
Yes, there is indeed. It is viable. The way these sort of arrangements work is a deal, for want of a better phrase, is made between a housing association partner who have full backing for the scheme and a developer who will build it out for them. That's our business model. We often do it. Say we've got 600 new homes, affordable homes under construction using similar mechanisms, so we can provide some reassurance it will come forward.
And can I just ask another question then about it was mentioned by some of the speakers, the timescale this was registered in the 9th of February 2023.
Sure.
So that's, I think, 19 months or so. Is there a reason for that delay? Do you happen to know?
I think it's down to the evolution of the scheme through the planning application process. We've been quite grateful to work closely with officers to evolve the scheme and get it to a position where it is acceptable.
Members, any other questions? Councillor Garrett. Sorry, Claret, sorry.
No, my question was about, you say it's going to be a very green house, with air source heat pumps and things like that. Are you also going to have solar panels?
Yes, so we'll be targeting EPC rating A, and that's not a planning requirement. That's a requirement of bringing the site forward with the housing association. So we'll be targeting, say, the most green in terms of that. We don't necessarily always use photovoltaic vaults or solar panels to facilitate that. They're not actually that efficient. There are a vast array of mechanisms we can use, such as air source heat pumps and fabric improvements to actually achieve that. I'm torn on PVs because I think they fulfil a role, but actually they can disturb the look of the appearance of the dwelling. So we do weigh that in the balance. So a very convoluted way of saying potentially it's not set in stone, but we will be seeking to achieve EPCA, even though it's not a planning requirement.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible to share with us, no, I'll rephrase it so that I don't have to have a name. Is the housing association that will be managing this a housing association which is currently working with Surrey Heath Borough Council?
It is indeed, yes, yeah.
Okay. Lovely. All right, thank you. And then the other thing is, and I'm a bit confused, one of the speakers talked about garages. Our planning officer said there are no garages. Are there any garages?
There's no garages.
There are no garages. No. And could you please give me the parking space that is available for plot 17?
Sure.
Sorry, to be clear, not the number of places, but the actual size of the 2 parking spaces that are available on plot 17, please. Whilst the officers are looking that up, my next question is that your current environmental study is out of date. So the findings of that study actually expired over a year ago. So I'm not really sure if it's a question for you or for the officers. I'm going to make a couple of other statements, actually. I am delighted that you're bringing forward affordable housing. And it's really welcomed and great to see. However, it does need to fit in with a Windlesham neighbourhood plan, or it needs to be cited as very special reasons to overcome the Windlesham neighbourhood plan. You have a tick box on the high thermal and energy efficiency, which is a requirement. Some of the other matters I will bring up with the officers, but that parking space for that plot, please, would be very useful. And then actually, I think the others are for the officers.
Sure, I'm happy to give my take on the environmental studies if needed, but happy to defer to officers.
Well, environmental studies, if you want to come on to it, or the officers are looking, that would be great.
Yeah, in our opinion, they are in date. They have been tested by the council's technical consultant teams who, Surrey Wildlife Trust, for instance, have reviewed our reports and they have found them to be sound and accurate.
Okay, in the report itself, it says that the report is valid until the summer of 2023, so it is out of date in the report. Certainly, the report that's available on the council website.
Whilst we wait for the officers.
Sorry, yeah. On the parking spaces for plot 17, I mean, they all accord with the standards set out in policy WMP 4.1 of the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan.
Could I have absolute confirmation of your measurements according to the detailed drawings? Because according to an architect that has looked at it, that plot size is too small. And also, can I have clarification around garages, please?
Whilst I'm doing the measurement, there are no garages on the site.
Sorry, I don't know if anyone else has got any other questions.
Councillor Wheeler, while the officers are getting your data, are you okay to I'll proceed?
I've got other questions, but they're for officers, not for the speaker.
Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. I echo Councillor Wheeler's congratulations of affordable housing, because it won't come as a surprise that in this chamber I regularly bang on about affordable housing. So, tick box there. The parking spaces looks the right sort of number as well, so tick box there. Two of my pet hates, to be fair. I was going to be more blunt than Councillor Wheeler, so you don't have to answer this question.
Sure.
Could you name the social housing provider? You don't have to. If you.
So
it is Sovereign.
Yeah.
Okay, I missed that. Obviously, Sovereign. Thank you. So, but they already work in the borough, apparently. No, exactly. That's what, because you asked a question. So can I have clarity? That is definitely Sovereign, because the question was asked: is it someone we already do in Surrey?
Yeah, so
as far as I'm aware, we don't do it in Sovereign.
Completely transparent with you. This is not material to the planning application in any way, but there's two parties at the table. Sovereign were interested in it. Okay. They're no longer interested. Okay. And we're looking to work with a different party. Okay. The party that we are working with on it operates solely within Surrey Heath, took on Surrey Heath's housing stock. It's very familiar to the council.
Thank you, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you. I'm glad I clarified that.
Members, any other questions for the Speaker? Thank you very much for your time. Councillor, we're still looking for your data. In the meantime, do any other members have questions for the officers? Councillor White.
On page 17, you said the site is considered sustainably located relative to its context close to the bus stop. Are there any buses?
There are.
To go with the bus stop? Apparently, I've just been told they're every 88 minutes. Is that sustainable?
I mean, ultimately, the site is situated, 175 metres from the settlement boundaries. We've had it assessed from Surrey County Council, who raised no objections on the sustainability of the site. Parking standards are in accordance with Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan. All dwellings would be provided with cycle parking, in addition to an EV charging unit as well. That would make it sustainable from our purposes.
Councillor Weeder.
Sorry, can I have absolute confirmation on the parking sizes for plot 17, please? Because the drawing, as I said, that I've certainly the architect that has looked at the drawing has said that it's 2.48 metres by 4.8 metres, which is below the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan. I've got a couple of other matters. Do you want me to come in now while that's being calculated? And if the officers are happy to make an absolute statement that it is the required size, then I'm obviously very happy with that, but I think we need to make that statement. The other point that I would like to raise is in relation to the survey, the species survey. The name of it escapes me right now, because according to the papers, it's out of date, and it's been out of date now for over a year. So I'd like a response back on that, please. I would also like to challenge the officers on their established density. My understanding is that you cannot have an established density on a site that isn't built. So the housings that you see to the left-hand side of the green block, none of those houses exist. Those houses may never exist. That planning application has been substantive for quite a long period of time, and although we're seeing movement on it, it certainly doesn't exist at the moment. And my understanding is that we should be taking into consideration density in relation to the current built form. And that brings back, again, the established density ratio of building to open space, which is Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan 2.1 and 2.4, I think, which is around maintaining the style and pattern of separation. I'd also like to come back on the affordable rented accommodation. We've just recently had a planning application approved in Windlesham for affordable rented accommodation and affordable housing. I would like to understand what validation we have for people that actually that are still on the register that want to live in a rural location. And this comes back to some of the comments that's been made by my colleagues around this application being sustainable. We have a challenge in Chobham, for example, where we have an affordable rented and affordable housing of people that are bitterly unhappy, and a 2-minute Google on social media will show you that, of the fact that they are stuck in Chobham. Because Chobham doesn't have a nightlife, it doesn't have any transport, much the same as Windlesham. The average cost of a pint in Windlesham is higher than the cost of a pint in Wetherspoons, and people end up being very isolated, both physically, emotionally and mentally, by being placed in a residential environment. So although I am delighted to see affordable homes coming forward, I question whether or not this is the right site for these affordable homes. So if we could just know, please, how many people are on the affordable homes register that have expressed a preference of living in a rural, quiet area with no weekend buses. I also noticed that as part of the affordable justification that the officer talks about the doctor's surgeries, and I wondered whether or not we've got confirmation that those surgeries are actually open to new patients at the moment. So they are my points for now. The other thing, as well as I'm really sorry if I missed it, the 30 mile an hour. I know that the applicants have written back to counties saying that they're accepting of the 30 mile an hour and the responsibility and support for implementing that, but I didn't see it anywhere in the actual planning application documents. Thank you. So there's quite a lot there to go through. Hopefully we weren't too distracted by measuring plans.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler.
So just on the on the parking spaces standards, they measure as 2.4 by 4.8 meters squared. That does fall short slightly of the measurement set out in the Windham Neighbourhood Plan. However, we do need to consider that ultimately we are providing the parking provision in line with the number of spaces that are required. And Surrey County Council have reviewed the spaces and raised no objection. Ultimately, we have to consider the planning balance here in terms of how much space is being taken up, in terms of the landscaping and the ratio of built development to the ancillary facilities here.
Might I suggest that that implies overdevelopment in that case, and it isn't in line with the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan, and we need to be really cautious about making statements that say that something is in line with the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan when it isn't.
I'll touch upon that point on the overdevelopment and the density figures that you referred to earlier as well. I mean, the density figures where I referred to were taken from within the settlement boundary and not the Heath Park Wood development. So the site is less than the density found to the development over here, which does fall within the settlement boundary. When we talk about overdevelopment and density, there's a number of factors to look at. We can't just pin it down to a single matter such as the car parking sizes. The development as a whole provides great setbacks from each of the site boundaries, provides good spacing in and around the buildings. All the internal space standards meet the requirements. The external amenity standards also meet the requirements. It also provides 100 square metres of open play space, which isn't typical of a development of this size as well. There's also the need for providing 61 trees on site as well. So there's a number of matters that need to be factored into the design and character impact of the development. And overall, we feel that relative to the surrounding context, this is an acceptable design.
Councillor Merriglad.
This is just a quick question. The people mentioned about how near it is the M3. What sort of barrier is there at that bit of the M3? I mean, is it just trees or anybody know? Somebody who lives there might know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of trees here, as you can see. That shows.
That's where it is. The M3's there.
Yeah, the M3's right here on the corner.
Right. So it's.
I mean, an air quality assessment and noise assessment was provided as part of the proposal. Our technical environmental health officer has reviewed those assessments and raised no objection to the proposal on those grounds.
Councillor Quinn.
Thank you. So I have to say, I appreciate Councillor Wheeler's points, but I have to say, I don't think there's any special area of the borough that doesn't require affordable housing. I'm pretty sure as much as many people who live in affordable housing might enjoy pints and nightlife, I'm sure there's plenty who just simply want a home and plenty who'd enjoy living in a rural space. But my particular question is, I noticed that some of the affordable units propose a 3-bedroom units. Now, I remember this being discussed at a previous council meeting that higher bedroom units, particularly 3- and 4-bedroom affordable units, were in particular short supply. Is that something that the officers would agree with?
Yeah, I mean, the proposed affordable split, in terms of the bedroom number split, is essentially in line with the recommendations of the council's latest housing needs assessment.
Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. Just following up on that point, I think there's a planning application later where I think the officers or certainly consultation suggest we need more 4-bedroom houses. And I'm pretty sure, I'm not imagining it, it's actually in these papers somewhere later on. I'm sure we'll come up with it then. My question was around trees. So I understand that I can never say the word, so I'm just going to say tree officer. The tree officer wasn't happy with the fact that obviously a TPO and lots of trees, and I also looking at it, some of them needed to be cleared up, I get that. My question is round the trees that are replacing them, are they going to be more mature trees that are going in, or are they going to be new, very small trees? Because obviously it's a lovely photograph up there, but what point will it actually look like that? Well, it won't look like that because obviously it's an artist's impression, but at what point will it look all green and lots of lovely trees?
There is a landscaping plan which would secure the final details of the species and the size of the proposed tree planting. And as I say, there's the trees on site. Unfortunately, you haven't had the benefit of a site visit, but many of them are dead. You know, they're low quality trees that's been assessed by the applicant's tree officer as well, and the council's tree officer has not disagreed with that assessment per se. So that's our position.
So, okay, going back to your thing about the landscaping, it doesn't answer the question. Will they be putting in new trees, i.e. really thin trees, or will they be putting in more mature trees? What sort of trees are going to be going in?
Well, we'd look at that as part of that landscaping condition. There'd have to be appropriate trees for the location, appropriate species for the location as well.
Yes. I think it's Councillor Garrett. I mean, just to clarify your point, I mean, as part of any landscaping, there'll be a mixture of new trees. Over time, they'll need to mature and take root into the ground. So that would be outlined as part of the condition if it was granted tonight.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Could you deal with two of the points that were raised by the speakers? This is a housing reserve site. Is it a last resort housing reserve site? And the other one was access roads. Once all the currently approved applications go through, there could be 4 within 180 metres onto Woodlands Lane. Is that correct? Thank you.
Just in terms of the housing reserve site, I mean, it's been allocated as well as identified within our 5-year housing land supply also. We also need to fall back on the context of our housing need, which has increased 68% since the local plan was adopted. There's no limit or indication of where housing would be provided necessarily. Whilst we do aim to try and provide housing towards the west of the borough, that's not to say that housing on sites such as this cannot come forward. On the point of the access road, so there would only be the new access created as part of this development. St Margaret's already contains an access. The Ferns contains 2 accesses, one of which is blocked up. But these 2 developments only relate to single dwellings at the moment, and then there's Heath Park Wood development which provides a single access here.
Okay, and that wouldn't be a problem then, having the extra access?
Surrey County Council has reviewed it. I mean, we've been in consultation with them. They've asked for amendments to the sight lines, and now they are satisfied with the scheme as it is.
Councillor David Whitcroft.
Thank you. I may have missed this in the report, but I don't think so. A couple of the speakers referred to timescales having run out. I think the period of 19 months was mentioned. Could officers just clarify that, please?
Yeah, I mean, the application was originally submitted a while back, but it's been through ongoing negotiation, particularly on the highway matters, that we've come to this position, and there is an active extension of time agreement agreed with the applicant.
Sorry, the suggestion was implied that maybe this had timed out in some sort of way. Can officers confirm that that's not the case? Thank you.
So the application hasn't timed out as such, I think, and as Mr. Rahman has already indicated, there's been various discussions with officers, and as you know, during the process of the application, the applicant can agree with the council extensions of time to extend the determination time of the application. And in this instance, this is what's happened. Because of ongoing amendments, ongoing negotiation, these extension times have been agreed. So that's the reason why it's taken this long to come to committee. But in terms of timing out, no, the application hasn't timed out.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. We've seen time and time again when planning applications are approved that they come back to committee because the delivery of affordable homes is no longer viable. Can we have assurance, please, that if this application was approved this evening, that there could be no variation in the affordable homes provision?
So in terms of the 106, that's going to be outlined in the schedule of the 106. And as you know, members and Councillor Wheeler, if they did come back at a later date, they would need to justify it through a viability report. And then obviously that would need to come back to committee and members would have the opportunity to look at it. But that's outlined within the Section 106 agreement, and that will outline the schedule in terms of the shared ownership and the full rent as well. So that would be the process and mechanism.
And can I confirm that at the moment there is no partner that is confirmed? So unlike in the papers where we've got a designated partner, as we stand at the moment, there is no partner to bring forward the affordable rented element or to manage the affordable housing in perpetuity. Is that correct?
So I think the applicant did agree that they have a registered provider on board to take on the full housing.
I believe that he said that he was talking to people. Can I please make I've got two suggested proposals. One is that this application is deferred until we have an up-to-date whatever it is, you know, the thing about this, basically the BAT things, etc., because I think that situation may well have changed with the initial work that is going in on some of the other sites. So that, for me, is one scenario. But to begin with, I would like to propose that this application is refused on the basis that it doesn't concur with Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan 2.1 and doesn't maintain the established, and the word in there is established, density ratio of buildings to open space, and that the general scale does not maintain the style and pattern of separation in the immediate area, and that in addition to that, not all of the parking spaces adhere to the size which is specified within the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan. I think if I'd had assurances that this would definitely go ahead, that they had somebody in there, that we rewrote it slightly to say that due to the very special circumstances, we were accepting that there was a slight variation from the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan in terms of those parking spaces, and again, the development, because of the very special circumstances and the affordable housing nature, I would have been more minded to support it, but we don't have that as a reason for granting, and I don't think we've got any guarantee whatsoever that this won't go back to a normal housing estate within a relatively short period of time, and that habitation regulation assessment is also not up to date, it's out of date. It's out of date as of summer 2023.
Just with respect of if it doesn't come forward for affordable housing, the application description is development of 20 affordable dwellings. So if there's any change to that, they'd have to submit a new planning application, because you can't just change that application description. And the section 106 will need to be on that premise as well, that it's affordable housing that we're delivering. And we can ensure that the clauses are within that section 106 to ensure that.
I have heard, with all due respect, I have heard that before with other applications, and there's been a sizable variation when it's come back in, and the guidance that we have been given within this committee is that we should approve that on the basis that density housing, blah-de-blah-de-blah, had already been approved, and that the affordability is no longer proven. So I don't know if I have a seconder for my proposal to refuse, but I will ask.
I'm happy to second that.
Members, I'm advised that we need to vote on the grant and then we can go to any other options after that. So I'm looking for a proposer and a seconder on a grant, subject to conditions and the S106. Okay, so we've got Councillor Wilson.
Okay, all those councillors for the officer's recommendation to grant subject to conditions and section 106 legal agreement, please raise your hand. This is for 4. So we've got Councillor Jonathan Quinn, Councillor Mary Glowett, Councillor Sean Garrett, Councillor David O'Mahony, Councillor Kevin Thompson, Councillor David Whitcroft and Councillor Richard Wilson. All those against? Councillor Helen Whitcroft, Councillor Victoria Wheeler, Councillor Valerie White. Any abstentions? Councillor Liz Noble. Thank you.
We have 7 for, 3 against and 1 abstain. The applicant has now been granted subject conditions and the section 106 legal agreement.
Can we, as a point of reference, please, have an update or can we have it minuted, please, that not all spaces do adhere with the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan?
We can have it as an informative.
You can have it any way you like, just so long as it's minuted, because we were told at the beginning of this meeting that they did and they don't.
Thank you, Councillor.
I've noted that. Thank you, Councillor Wheeler.
Members, our next application for tonight is Princess Royal Barracks, Brunswick Road, Deep Cut. Please to confirm if you have any declarations concerning this. I know I've had an email from Savills. Has anyone else? Has everybody else? So that should be noted.
Sorry, Chair, could I just also mention that while we were at the site visit, there was a representative from the applicant there, but didn't influence us, and I'm sure we all have an open mind on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This relates to Phase 6A at the Princess Royal Barracks in Deep Cut. Just to remind members, this is obviously the overall Deep Cut development, and the phase we're looking at is this one in here, which relates to this one. And as you'll notice from your agenda pack, there's a bit saying aerial photo, and there's nothing there. This is the aerial photo that should have been there. And this is a drone photo taken by the applicant and provided in support of the application. So we have Mindenhurst Road coming down here, we have Brunswick Road going here, and we have Bracken Hill, formerly known as the Loop Road, up here. Now, Brunswick Road, Mindenhurst Road and Bracken Hill are complete, pretty much. And this site has 2 access points that were approved under the application for the Loop Road and also the application for the Southern Sang. So the northern access point is up here on Bracken Hill and the southern access point is down here on Brunswick Road. Just to give members a sense of how the site is, this point up here where the site adjoins what will be the Southern Sang, which is currently being constructed, is about 10 metres higher than the junction with Brunswick Road and Mindenhurst Road. You can see the Carla parcel to the south. The Frog Public House is over here. This is Trivelhus. And these areas up here are the remaining residential parcels that will be coming forward in the next 2 or 3 committees. Now this is a view from the junction of Mindenhurst Road and Brunswick Road here. So we're looking north. So you've got the pub here and the beginning of the Trivelhus houses here. And then we're looking south. So basically these are the continuation of the Trivelhus houses as they go up the hill. And our site is over here. And this will be another residential phase coming forward. And this is just looking at a wider picture of the junction with Brunswick Road and Mindenhurst Road. And these are the types of buildings that are already on the site. The site is the subject of a demolition consent, and I believe the applicant is looking to implement that shortly. These are looking at the access points on Bracken Hill. So this is at the northern end of the site. So this is looking down the hill towards, if you go around the corner, you'll end up on Mindenhurst Road. And this is looking east, and this is going to be the Southern Sang. And again, going down to the southern part of the site, we're looking on Brunswick Road. Again, we have the implemented access point here. We're looking back towards Mindenhurst Road there, and then we're looking towards what will be the Southern Sang going forward. This area here will be the open space. I think we've got a better picture here. Yeah, so this is the access. So this area here, these trees are all being retained, and this will be the local area of play, an open space area. And this is just showing the relationship of the development site to what is currently under construction, which is the Southern Sang. Now, this is the proposed development that we have for consideration this evening. It is a total of 120 dwellings, comprising 2, 3, 4 and 5 bedroom dwellings. We have 2 predominant access routes through the site. So we have the north-south one, which is, from a highway point of view, deemed to be the main one. And then we have the east-west one. This was very important because this connects the village green here through to the Southern Sang over here. So we have got an east-west and a north-south. Punctuating here, we have the open space. And throughout the site, we have the focus buildings. So we have the flat, we have 2 flat blocks here, 2 here, 1 here, 1 here. We have quite a strong perimeter development because that gives a sense of enclosure to the street and it gives it a strong character. And it also, if you have a look, you can just about, if you look at the site like that, you can tell that we have 2 character areas here. So you have the higher one, which is the village green, which is a tighter form of development. But when you go towards the eastern part of the site, it's more, it has a looser pattern of development, it is more open, and that reflects the fact it's in the Minden Slopes area. Now this is the parking plan. All properties have got a parking space, and all are to standard with the exception of plot 114, which is up here, which is a 2-bedroom house. It just has 1 space, but right opposite it, it also has a visitor space. The County Highway Authority are satisfied with the level of provision being made. And these are just indicative elevations of what is being proposed. So we have one of the flat blocks, we have the coach houses. Just by way of clarification, if I go back, previous. Let's go back to the next one. Right, so the coach houses which lead to parking courts, like up here and through here, what happens is you have an archway. So you have parking on the bottom, and then where the coach houses provide access, you will have an archway. Where they don't, there will be another parking space. So let's have a look. So see. And this is an example of the 3-bedroom, the 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom. And these are in the proposed street scene. So this would be along Brunswick Road. So this is the point up to what will be the open space area here. And this is the other side going towards the southern sang, so it's going up the hill. And then we have the Mindenhurst Road street scene. So this is the junction with Brunswick Road. This is the Carla scheme. So we have a strong defined frontage. And this is what would be seen on the Bracken Hill frontage, overlooking the drainage swell. So we go up the hill. And the applicant has provided some CGIs. So this is the area in the centre of the site. So this is building B, which provides a visual stop for this part of the site and as a focal point. And then we have the view from Brunswick Road. So again, we have the open space going down there. This is the junction as proposed. And this is Bracken Hill looking west. The scheme makes a major contribution to the ongoing redevelopment of the Deep Cut site and the Borough Council's housing land supply. It provides 19 affordable housing, which is the number required under the terms of the permission. It is of an appropriate layout and design which is acceptable in street scene and residential amenity terms. The tree loss on the Brunswick Road frontage particularly is offset by replacement and new landscaping. 183 trees are proposed to be planted, of which 122 is a net gain. And no objection is raised by the County Highway Authority or Surrey Wildlife Trust in respect of this proposal. The recommendation is to grant subject to the conditions and also the additional condition on the update sheet relating to the false glazed windows in apartments, buildings A and B to be retained. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sarita. We have no members of the public speaking with us today. So, members, do you have any questions for Sarita or the officers? David Whitcroft did just manage to get his hand up first. Sean, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I was the person who requested the site visit, which took place earlier this week, and I did it for two reasons. One, I was concerned about the loss of trees. And two, I was concerned about the relationship with the existing homes on the other side of the road, previously built by Carla. In respect of the trees, I was very satisfied that the overall benefits offered by the development outweigh the loss of the trees. The trees that I was particularly concerned about are in fact being retained as part of the access road, the road that runs through the site. And in respect of the relationship with the Carla properties, to some extent there is some mirroring. In other words, where Carla have built flats, so it is proposed to build flats here. So they're opposite each other, if you like, and I think that's going to give a good symmetry to the street scene, as it were. So, just for the record, I'm the local member. For what it's worth, I see no problems whatsoever with this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. By the way, page 90 was talking about the consultation with about 4 bedrooms, which is what we were talking about earlier on. So I get that the affordable housing is what it is. So it's not reference to that. My question is around the starting the demolition, which I think is October 2024, with then the first house being available, I think was 2026, if memory serves me correct, with the details. My concern is around the demolition and the fact that just across the way there is a school. So what mitigations will there be to make sure that any of the demolition of all the dust and all that sort of stuff will be not affecting the school when obviously we're in playground, etc.?
The closest site to the school is the Bloor parcel, which is 6C, and their buildings have just been demolished. But within the terms of their demolition permission, as with the case for the current site, there are measures within the demolition plan that you have things like, if, for example, it's a dry day, you have damping down of dust, there are noise controls. Notwithstanding any of that, they all still remain subject to the Environmental Protection Act. So if it becomes a nuisance, notwithstanding anything we could have approved, they would still be subject to that legislation as well. So we make sure that we have a good overall control over the activities that go on. Obviously, in this case, we have residential directly to the south, so we're very mindful of that as well. That's right.
Councillor Wheeler?
It may be in there, but I've got a feeling it isn't, and I'm sorry if it is and I've missed it. I just wonder, in light of the case that we heard earlier this evening, it would be sensible to remove permitted development rights, or to have a condition that the properties cannot build a garden shed larger than X by X. I'm thinking in particular, if we look at the relationships on some of these gardens, there's on the plan that Councillor White has got, it's sort of got a reference of 14 and 10, which is off the Brunswick Road, and something large and permitted development along that site would make those gardens pretty horrible. And I just wondered whether or not that would be a reasonable condition to impose in order to protect the light and residential amenity.
I'm happy to confirm, Councillor Wheeler, if you'd like to look at condition 7, it's done. For the very reason that you say, because if you look at the report, some of the garden sizes, they are there or thereabouts, and we have, because of the levels particularly, when you look at permitted development, it talks about ground level. And in all of Deep Cut, you have such issues, particularly with ground level, so it was deemed appropriate that all permitted development is removed, so we can make sure, it's not to say that we will stop development going forward, but it means that as an authority we retain the control to make sure that we end up with appropriate relationships, and it still does reflect the parameter plans and everything else that goes with Deep Cut.
I shouldn't have doubted it for a moment, and I should have read it more fully. Thank you.
There's a lot to read.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. And I think you've explained before about the arterial roads and the sort of more residential roads on the estate, but the front doors on Mindenhurst Road, well, the front doors of the houses on Mindenhurst Road, the front door is on Mindenhurst Road, which is the arterial road. Obviously, people are going to park their cars and everything behind it, but will the houses still be serviced by, deliveries and postage and everything going to the front doors?
It's a combination, really. I mean, I think if you were talking about DPD or someone like that, they are going to park on Mindenhurst Road and deliver. I mean, that's the reality of the world. The parking is to the rear, and they've also got gates so they can get in and out. And all of the refuse requirements and how that will be serviced has been agreed with Joint Waste Solutions, who are the people that do our bin collection. So from that point of view, I think we are make sure that that where we can have servicing, we do. But the Highway Authority were clear that there's going to be no vehicular access onto Mindenhurst Road.
The officer's recommendation is to grant subject to conditions. Members, do we want to propose the officer's recommendation? And if so, can I have a proposer and a seconder?
Sean Garrett.
And Helen Whitcroft.
So all those councillors for the Office of Recommendation to grant subject to conditions, please raise your hands. That's unanimous.
The application has been granted, subject to conditions. For the last application, does anybody want a break before we kick in? No? Right. Plough on? Okay. I do. I might take a 2-minute break. Anybody else? You can watch me walk out and walk back again. Members, the final planning application for this evening is 99 to 101 Guildford Road, Lightwater. If there are any declarations of interest at this time, declare them now. Lisa, if you'd like to make the presentation.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. So there's one update on the application from the LFA, raising no objection out, and as a result we've amended condition 18. So the application relates to the residential redevelopment of a commercial site within the settlement area of Lightwater. The proposal seeks the demolition of all existing buildings and the construction of 21 dwellings, 19 three-bedrooms and 2 masonettes of a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom, together with a new access road onto Guildford Road and associated parking and landscaping. So the application site is outlined in red. To the north of the site is on this side here, which is St Anne's House, and the Crosby Club, which is in commercial use. The rest of the surrounding boundaries are in residential use, and on the opposite side of the road is also the post office. So here are some application sites. So this is looking southwest from Guildford Road. So this is on the opposite side of the road looking into the site. And then these are looking southwest along Guildford Road. So the image on the left is again looking towards the site, and the image on the right is the opposite side of the road. And then this is taken slightly further down, looking west. So you can see here, this is the edge of the application site. This is the substation, and the residential units continue. And then these are some images from within the site. So this is looking north in the site back towards Guildford Road, the image on the left. The image on the right is looking towards Grasmere Road. And then again, these are looking actually back through the site. So that's looking southwest towards number 6 Grasmere Road, and then the image on the right is looking south to the rear. And then these are some images again looking north in the site. These are looking back towards Guildford Road, so you can see some of the existing buildings that are on site at the moment. So here's the existing layout. So the 3 properties, or 3 buildings along the front, have a similar. So the site previously operated as a car sales and repair MOT service business, last operating in October 2020. Currently the site has an operation of a car sales business and car washing facility. This is a short-term lease with the landowner. The existing built form on the site consists of 7 buildings. As you saw from the site photos, images, the 2-storey buildings fronting Guildford Road have a similar appearance to residential buildings, and the single-storey commercial buildings are sited further back in the site. So this is the proposed layout, which would incorporate 2 terraces and 2 pairs of semi-detached dwellings fronting Guildford Road, and 2 terraces of 4 sited away from Guildford Road towards the rear. A new access road would be created off Guildford Road to serve the development. The access road would form a shared space for vehicles, bikes and pedestrians. A total of 41 parking spaces are proposed, which includes 17 electric charging points. All the proposed dwellings will be provided with 2 spaces apart from the 1-bedroom unit, which will be allocated 1 space. The proposed residential use on the site would be more in keeping with the surrounding land uses than the existing use, and would also bring wider planning merits, including additional housing and a policy-compliant 40% affordable housing. So the proposal would provide a policy-compliant 40% level of affordable housing, which includes 2 first homes. These are the 1- and 2-bedroom units shown in yellow, the 1 shared ownership unit, which is shown in red, and the 5 affordable rents shown in blue. So the next images will go through the design of the dwelling. So for reference, the top right corner shows where they are within the site, and then the elevations, the front and rear, the rear of them. So this is Terrace 1, fronting Guildford Road. These are the 2 pairs of semi-detached dwellings that also front Guildford Road. And then this is the central terrace in the middle. So the dwelling on the corner here is the 1- and 2-bedroom masonette unit. And these are the last pair of terraces. And then that's a street scene image, so you can see that the access allows views into the site. So in terms of the character and appearance, officers consider that the layout would integrate into the surrounding. The proposed scale of development sits comfortably within the site, achieving a good ratio between the built form and plot sizes. The proposed elevational treatment, detailing and form of the development has taken cues from the surrounding area, particularly noting the traditional pitched roof, distinct chimney features and fenestration design. The proposed layout, scale and detailing and landscaping is considered to respect and enhance the character and quality of the area. The proposal is supported by the Council's urban design consultant. In terms of impact to existing neighbours, so number 6 Grasmere Road is this relationship here, so it has a distance of approximately 18.5 metres from rear to rear relationship. Number 3 Coin Close is this dwelling here, so it has a side to side relationship, has a distance of approximately 5.5 metres. And then the relationship with these dwellings to the rear here has a separation distance of approximately 15 metres. And then the dwelling fronting Guildford Road, number 97A, is separated by the substation but would have a distance of approximately 9 metres. The proposed development would therefore not result in any significant adverse harm to neighbouring amenities. In terms of the future occupiers, the proposal would comply with the nationally described space standards. It's noted that 4 of the garden spaces are below standards. However, these are marginal amounts and the gardens are a good shape and form. It's considered that on balance, the future residents will be provided with a good standard of accommodation within a sustainable location, taking into account the benefits of the scheme, including a policy-compliant affordable housing. No objection is raised. The proposal would provide 41 car parking spaces and provide each unit with a policy-compliant level of parking. The proposal would provide an overall reduction in daily trips when compared to the existing lawful use on the site, which reduces traffic generation. Highways have raised no objection to the access. Swept path diagrams have been submitted to demonstrate the site can be serviced, including refuge vehicles. The proposal is considered acceptable from a highway safety and parking. In summary, the proposed residential use on the site would be more in keeping with the surrounding land and is considered an improvement to the surrounding area and residential properties. The proposal would provide 40% affordable housing, which is policy compliant. The design is supported by the urban design consultant. The proposal would not result in harm to existing neighbours and is acceptable for future occupiers. No objection is raised from Highways, Surrey Wildlife Trust or the LFA. Overall, the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions and a legal agreement to secure the affordable housing and Sang and Sam on the site.
Thank you, Melissa. Members, we have no public speakers on this application, so do you have any questions of Melissa or the officers? Councillor Thompson?
You may or may not be able to answer this, but we did receive an email from the developer, which maybe we should have declared at the start of this application, where the developer says that it mentions the housing association that it's working with and says if this application is approved, they will work together to change the tenure of the homes to be sold on the open market to provide more affordable housing. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but selling on the open market doesn't sound like it's going to provide more affordable housing. Do you know what the developer means by that comment, and is it relevant to this application?
So they have raised interest that they will be seeking 100% affordable housing on the scheme through a grant. However, that doesn't form a material consideration of this planning application. And if that was the case, it would come back forward to committee as they would need to seek changes to the legal agreement as well.
Gavin?
So just to give you further details on this, so it's not material as part of this planning application, so members shouldn't consider that 100% offer at all. It's 40% being proposed. As it works, and how it works is Homes England would give the funding to the sites, and they don't give the funding up front, so you get planning permission, and then they give the contribution after the permission has been granted to the housing provider, and then they would have to come back in, as Ms Turney has said already, to change the Section 106 agreement to 100% affordable housing. Don't ask me why it's like that. That's the mechanism, and that's how it all works in practice, and that central government sets that as part of their funding regime.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I think you partially answered my first part of my question. I was going to ask about viability, and because the land values are so much higher in the villages, whether more affordable housing could be viable. I know it says policy compliant at 40%, so it's actually, so there should be 8.4, but as it's pointed to in the report, I read the interim procedural guidance dealing with CP5, and that says to round to the nearest whole number. So I guess this is probably a question for the head of planning. Should the interim procedural guidance for portions of an affordable home like that, should it round to the nearest or should it round up? Because CP5, the intent of that is for a development this size to have a minimum of 40%. So maybe 8.4 should actually be 9.
Paragraph you're looking at, Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, I have it right to hand in the report. It's about the affordable homes percentage, and it mentions in the report that it should be 8.4, but it's rounded down to 8 because that's the nearest whole number. So it's actually 8 is slightly less than 40% of 21. So, but that is following the interim procedural guidance, which is on the council's website, which does say it should round to the nearest one. But maybe in this case, because CP5 says that a development of this size should have 40%, but it doesn't actually. The intent of that isn't exactly 40%. It's a minimum of 40%, surely.
Yeah, I think the reason why it's like that, because obviously you're not having more affordable, you're having less affordable on the site, so you'd obviously round downwards, because obviously if you're rounding upwards, that means you're proposing more affordable housing, so that's the reason why it goes downwards basically as part of it. And also, I think another part of this application is the first homes as well. The first home element feeds into that as well, so you get less affordable housing in terms of the shared ownership. I mean, first homes is a form of affordable housing, but in terms of the sort of most needed affordable housing in terms of affordable rents, but as part of our procedure and policy, an element of it has to be first homes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this the report is correct in saying that it meets the policy, and as you say, first homes are the least needed affordable homes. Thank you.
Councillor Garrett, just as a short reminder, it is 12 to 10.
Thank you, Chair. Just two really short questions. Well, one point actually. Good to see 40% affordable housing. It doesn't happen on many applications, so that is obviously really good news. I'm just a little bit, sounds like a broken record, a little bit concerned about the parking. I know it meets all the guidance, and Surrey County are happy because Surrey County are always happy. It says county aren't worried about the lack of visitor parking. I'm pretty sure the residents will be if they've got visitors coming. So I'm just concerned that in this particular instance there is no visitor parking, and obviously I know that they'll overflow onto the roads, but is that really where we want them? So I just want to make sure that I know it's meeting the guidance as far as parking goes, but is there any, because I can't remember, any guidance that means they have to have visitor parking or not?
So the Surrey County standards encourage visitor parking, but they aren't required to provide any.
Councillor Thompson, then followed by Councillor Wheeler.
So this is the ward that I represent. I know the site very well, and it's a great example of a brownfield site that's right for development. So I have no problems with the development in theory. I have got some concerns over the density and the two elements that residents have brought to my attention is the point that Mr. Councillor Garrett just raised about visitor parking, and not so much the impact of the residents, but the impact of Lightwater residents more generally on parking on Guildford Road. So a question there is, whilst there are no, it's difficult to tell from the plan, whilst there's no allocated bays, is there any scope for any parking on the access road at all? It didn't look like it, to be honest. It's pretty tight. And then the other question, the other concern that's been raised is the loss of employment opportunity. So previously, obviously, a piece of land that provided employment, both in terms of the now disused car showroom and then the car wash and things like that. So is that a valid planning application, planning concern or not? That could be quite easily cleared up. So yeah, they're the questions about the parking and the employment.
So in terms of the parking, there obviously aren't any visitor spaces provided, but as County have set out in their comments, the stress survey has been carried out that there is off-street parking available. It would be not within the site, but within close enough distance that we're satisfied that the site meets the parking standards. In terms of the loss of the employment on the site, we'd obviously encourage the employment to our core employment areas. It is acknowledged that there would be the loss of employment, but due to its setting within the residential area, that it would result in an improvement of the site and for those residents, and we consider it acceptable in that for that reason.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. I've got couple of quite specific ones. You'll be pleased to know that I'm not going to bang on about minimum space standards. I'm aware that we've been to planning appeal and lost on that one, so I learned my lessons. It is to do with Unit 18 and the windows on Unit 18 and the weird blocks in the garden of Unit 18. Is it possible to have a look at the plans that relate to that? I'm just thinking it's quite... The house at number 6 currently has a really nice, easy... So if you could just zoom in on that a bit for me, please. I can't... Is that a 2-storey development? Because it doesn't have... On the other plans, it's sort of got an upper storey. So it's type F, whatever type F is. I'm sorry, I don't...
Are you talking about are you wanting to see the rear elevation of that?
So what I'm wanting to see, the rear elevation, I can see that it's got open doors out into the garden, and that's obviously completely and utterly fine. Is that side elevation and what it is in the side elevation window, what that might be, and also what the 2 grey blobs are in the back garden. And the other query I've got is bin storage and bin collection and the turning circle within this location as well, please.
So in terms of I don't have an elevation of that side elevation, but condition 23 covers the Unit 18. Any first floor windows would be obscurely glazed. There is a first floor window in that elevation, but it's been conditioned to be obscurely glazed under condition 23.
Could we have it as top opening as well? Because the problem with obscure glazing is that when you open a window,
yeah,
it does say that, does it? Okay, I'm sorry, I've missed that. And the 2 blobs in the back garden, and the other one is bin storage and collection.
Yeah, that'd be for the bin and cycle store.
For the whole site, the bin store?
Yeah, the refuge vehicle would enter the site, and the swept path diagrams have been submitted to demonstrate it can enter the site and turn within the site.
So it's individual bins for...
Each house will have an individual bin that will be collected, yes.
So Unit 18, that bin and cycle storage on the corner of that plot, if you could go back to... Is that just for Unit 18? Or is it for Unit 19 and 18, with presumably Unit 20 going to Unit 21? Because the other buildings don't have a bin and cycle. So if you zoom in a bit, thanks.
Yeah, it would just be for Unit 18.
So Units 19 and 20 don't have that? Is that what it is under the tree? So you take your bins all the way down the bottom of your garden and then you bring them all the way back up through your house for Unit 20 and Unit 19 for it to be collected, because it doesn't look like they've got a side entrance, they're a terrace. So I don't think, I'm not sure that can be quite, I'm hoping that's not quite right, because it looks a bit odd to me.
I would just consider that Unit 19 and 20, they just haven't shown their bin store location within their rear garden, but you'd expect it would be within their boundary of their site, that they wouldn't enter the gardens of neighbouring properties to store their bins.
Sorry, the point that I'm making is that if underneath the tree, those 2 grey blocks that are drawn are their bin storage, they have no way of taking their bins out to be collected other than through the houses, because I don't know what those blobs are, basically. If you're saying it's bin storage, I've got no reason whatsoever to not consider that, but they can't get them out other than through their house. In fact, nor can Unit 21. In fact, quite a lot of the properties seem to have a bin storage in their back garden that they can't get out to be collected. So that doesn't look... It looks a bit terrifying to me, to be honest. The units 2, 3, 4 and all the rest of it, yes, I can see that. Unit 21 possibly has got a path, but the other units show bin storages which nobody can access other than taking them out through the house.
Councillor Hode. Julie?
Thank you. Just adding a possible solution to this. I lived in Sunningdale in a house that was centre of a terrace. I had a back garden. My bins were in the back garden, so obviously no way of getting, as in here, the bin from the back garden to the front for collection other than through the house. But in fact, what happened was the property had a legal right to pass over. There was a gate in the fence from my property to the adjacent property. I had a legal right to go through that gate with my bin and take it round their side alley just to put it out on the street and bring it back again. And that was a specific legal access just for bins. So I don't know, I've not looked at this one, but I wonder whether there might be something.
Yeah, I can't see that here, and that tends to be in older properties. I'm not sure if yours was an older property, but that kind of thing, that sort of whole thing. So can I just raise a query about it? I'm sure you've got a solution to it. I can see that Gavin's looking hopeful.
So I'm looking at the conditions here. We usually do have a refuse plan condition on most decisions. I don't think we have one on this application, so that can be added. But also we could look to amend condition 16, where there's a landscape management plan about introducing the refuse there, or it could be a separate condition as part of the application, and for those details to be submitted as part of the application, as part of the condition, sorry.
It's not my ward, it's up to the ward councillors to go with that, but it does look a bit odd. So I think we agree, do we? It looks a bit odd and we can't see any way we can get them out of the gardens.
Thank you. Councillor White, Councillor Quinn after.
Different subject. The parking spaces obviously are not on the land belonging to the houses. So are they allocated parking, or will it just be a free-for-all as to who gets home first and takes the parking spaces?
I haven't got a copy of that plan, but there is another plan that specifically shows which each plot has a specific space. So each space will be allocated 2 spaces. Each plot will be allocated 2 spaces apart from the 1-bedroom unit. And then one of my colleagues has just found that the bin store for units 19 and 20 is located under this tree here.
Sorry, and unit 16 can go down the path, unit 15 can go down the path. Fabulous. So we don't know what the blobs are in the back garden. Do we think that's bike storage?
Yeah, there'll be cycle storage, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Quinn.
Staying on the topic of bins, I noticed one of the concerns raised by residents was Unit 13's bins being next to house number 3. I'm just wondering if we could zoom in and just see that example. So where is Unit 13 located? Doesn't it seem...
So Unit 13 is the masonette.
Right.
So this unit here has technically 2 dwellings, a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom.
And the bin is next to house number 3,
so it's
on the other road.
Unit 13's bin stores here, and Unit 14 is actually under this arrow here.
Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Chair. Just to point out, it's 10 o'clock. It's 10 o'clock.
We've discussed it. Apparently, as we started, we can go through till it's
that's correct.
right. Hard stop at 10:30.
Yeah. So members, just for Councillor White's benefit here, in terms of the parking, in terms of your comment about allocating the parking, we'll add a condition in terms of the car park management plan as well, as part of the conditions that's allocated to the units accordingly.
I'm not actually sure, sorry, I'm not actually sure that benefits the site. If I think the primary concern of the site is visitor parking, the lack of. There will be people, these are starter homes, some of them are smaller, properties. There will be people that have one car. And so by having allocated spaces, you're having spaces that are potentially going unused and no visitor provision. I'm not sure that actually benefits this site. I am concerned about the density of this site and the parking situation, but whether or not there are reasons to refuse.
I think just on that point, and as outlined in the officer's report and the presentation, we are basically been advised by Surrey County Council. They've assessed the transport statement, the technical advice, technical information. They've given their feedback on that, and they've said some of the side roads can be utilised for visitor parking. And so we have to follow that advice from them, really, on that, because the actual scheme itself complies with the parking standards.
And just to add to that point, the previous scheme which was considered, highways didn't raise an objection to, and that had more units, flatter developments, etc. And no objection was raised to that either. And as we weren't a determining authority in the end, but we didn't put a reason down on highways grounds.
Members, any other questions? The officer's recommendation is to grant, subject to conditions and legal agreement, to secure the affordable housing and SAM contribution and SANG contributions. Do we want to propose the officer's recommendation? If so, could I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Right, all those who are going to vote for, please raise your hand. So I'll just call out the names. So Councillor Helen, I think it's unanimous now. Okay. Thank you very much.
That's unanimous and has been granted. Subject to conditions, legal agreement, secure the affordable housing, SAM contribution and SANG. Meeting closes. Thank you very much.